So those, then as our graduates start finishing up, then we'll start rolling in everyone else. So this is our systems of support and what we do to help our students. And then when we get down to the student monitoring section, I'm going to go over and be the driver of the computer for a second. But our intervention pathways. This gives you an idea of our approach to students. So we are student-centered, and we focus on three things. We focus on the social-emotional whole child. We focus on work completion and academics, and then we focus on attendance. And we kind of have a way to monitor our students. So the social-emotional behavior teachers are usually the first ones that see if a student is struggling or if they have something going on in their world or whatever it may be. And so they'll refer to the school counselor, they'll refer to myself, or to our other counselors that we have in the building. And then by that, the counselor or our other resources will look at our SBOT, our Student Health Center, or if we need to involve community resources. One of the great things about being so small is we have a really good pulse on the majority of our students so that we can be able to meet them where they're at and help them remove or overcome any barriers. And then we put in an intervention plan. What does this student need to be successful? Then if we do academics, that starts with the teacher as well. And once we get to the student monitoring system, I'll show how we monitor our students' progress each week. But the teacher is the ultimate person. Did this person meet their weekly goals? And if you don't know, Linderman is independent. So if Scott is in his math class, he might be working on geometry. I might be working on Algebra 1. Heather might be in consumer math. Everybody's doing something different. And the teacher will spend time with each of the students and saying, okay, this is what you need to do this week in consumer math. And we'll explain things, get them going, and then the student just starts working on it. And then when the student has a question, they're like, hey, Mr. Letourneau, can you help me? And then Mr. Letourneau will meet with them with their directing question, have them go on, and boom. And then he's going to help with the geometry question. Then he'll help with an algebra question. So the teacher really knows, and the students all know what they're supposed to be working on. So if a student is struggling, we have a level system, meaning they didn't meet their goals. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and I'll show you that in a couple minutes as well. But that's the beginning of our intervention plan. So teachers are responsible for putting a student on level 1. If they didn't meet their goals still, then they're moved to level 2. And then after that, then they are put on an attendance plan if it's an attendance issue, or they visit with me to try to figure out a little bit more in depth. Then we have attendance monitoring. And I would love to say that the Linderman kids attend school every single day, but that would not be true. So when a student is struggling and they're not getting their academic goals met, they're moved up to a level 3, meaning the teacher has deemed that attendance is the issue. So then we have a commitment plan. What can this student do? What can we help? What will they do for the next 2 weeks to try to get that attendance increased? If it still doesn't happen, then they move to level 4, and then they meet with me. So that's that one. We can go to the next one. Sorry, I set my PowerPoint up a little bit. My links. So this is the level system. So the level system, level 1 means that you have your goals you're supposed to meet for the week in your class or classes, and you didn't meet your goals. So then what's going to happen is that there's a list of interventions that could be down there. You may be put on daily goals. So instead of saying, here's your goals for the week, the teacher may say, we're going to map out and chunk it down that this is what you need to do each day. Obviously, your weekly goal is too big. Let's do this Monday. Let's do this Tuesday. Let's do this Wednesday to help chunk it down for the students. You may have to turn in your cell phone. As we know, cell phones can be a distraction. So let's turn in our cell phone. Let's get you back on track. The teacher may pull you out during their duty prep to do some one-on-one instruction. And sometimes that just helps to get them in a little quiet environment without the rest of the kids around and work specifically on whatever is going on. May assign seating, connect with a tutor, we contact parents, maybe make a schedule adjustment, whatever might need to be done. If a student still does not get done after the first week of level 1, then they're moved to level 2. And a person might be on level 2 for like a month, but as long as they are attending every day and they're there, then we're going to keep trying to work with them. Level 3 means that attendance is that issue, and that's where they're going to fill out, meet with their advisor and fill out a commitment plan. And then they've got 2 weeks on that commitment plan, and either they're going to get it together, maybe extend it because they partially got it together, or they just said, I don't really want to go to school, I'm not going to do my work then, and then they meet with me. Level 4 is meeting with me. We do the same thing. We give you 2 weeks depending on what the plan is. I met with 2 students this week on level 4, and they were seniors, and I have said, you have 1 week to get your graduation requirements done, or I'm putting you on a leave of absence, and you will come back the last 2 weeks of May. One was like, oh, that might be too much, I don't know, that's too stressful. And I said, well, if your teachers come to me next Thursday and say, you tried your hardest and you were here and you need X amount of extra time, we'll totally go with that. She came to school yesterday and had everything done. Like, you just needed to find that leverage point. She seriously had like 2 assignments left to do and to be done. And she's had those 2 assignments for like 4 weeks. So now she's like, oh my gosh, I actually did it. So it's finding that leverage point. So nothing is really canned, because it's looking at that bigger picture and what does this student need? What does this student need? Because what might work for one might not work for the other. So this is the level 3 attendance plan I was telling you about. So every student is assigned an advisor, and every teacher is an advisor and is responsible for 12 to 15 students. They do an orientation class with their new students that they're assigned to, which is kind of like a 3-week, this is how you work independently, this is how you're going to be successful in school, this is how we goal set. So they connect with them on credits, what you need to graduate. So they have a pretty good relationship. So when they get to that level 3, the teacher sits down, or the advisor sits down with the student and is like, okay, things aren't working, what are we going to commit to? What can we do to help you be successful? Whether it's setting an alarm, whether it's not leaving at lunch, whether it's coming in and getting help, whatever that the student comes in with. Because really, I can sit down and say, I want you to do A, B, and C, but if the student does not have buy-in, there's no way they're going to be doing A, B, and C. So we really want their voice. So again, we monitor for 2 weeks, and then we go from there. If it doesn't work, then it goes to level 4. And level 4 is going to be similar to the level 3, except for then they get the pleasure of meeting with me. And so we do the same thing. I may say, okay, so if I have a student who's only attending 1 day a week and not meeting their goals, for them we might say, I want you to be here 3 days a week, or I might want you to be here 4 days a week. We'll do a schedule change. We'll do, you can have no tardies. It'll be, I'm going to call you every day at 7:30. It'll be whatever it is that again, this student feels they need and that we can commit to get them back in school. For these 2, for this week, it was you're on level 4, you haven't been here, you're behind in your classes, but yet you could graduate in a week. So you get her done, or I'm going to bring you back to last week. And not because I know that they're not going to graduate, but sometimes they just have to be like, oh my gosh, I need to really get here. And then they come the next day and everything's finished. And so then this last one, I just want to show you how we monitor. So this is our, it'll be hard to see, but every week our teachers monitor or put in this document Did their student meet their goals? Did they work complete? Are they level 1? How many assignments are they behind? Whatever notes are. I've taken out all students' name, I've taken out all teachers' comments, I've taken out of mine just to keep it anonymous, but just to give you an idea. So every teacher has a tab, and what we can do, well, maybe I'm not gonna be able to. Well, there's, like, I should be able, how do I? Like, missing a little. Okay, well, apparently I only gave you only and not editing, right? So, sorry. So imagine that you have all this data, and what we can do is, I go in here all the time with students. I sort by students, I sort by advisors, I sort by class, and it will pull up how that student has been doing, what they've done for the week. When I meet with parents, this is a great tool. So like, okay, let's see how Johnny is doing. I sort by Johnny, it pulls it up and looks, oh, he's work complete, but starting right here, he started getting behind. And right now, he's 15 assignments behind in English World History. And then we have a goal sheet that the student is now on daily goals, because that's what happens when you're behind. And then I'll show the parents where they can go into Google Classroom and see the daily goal sheets that are being met. So it's just another tool that we can use. So when advisors are tracking their students, they can sort by their advisor name. All of their students will be pulled up for the week. They can see who's completed goals, who's made progress, who they need to be pulling in and checking in. Sorry, that was going to be so fancy and it did not work. Then triage is our last one. And triage is what we do in all 3 programs. So our Aspire program meets once a day and plans out for students what they're going to talk, what they're going to do, who needs help. They meet at the beginning of the day and they actually meet again at the end of the day. I meet with them weekly in a formal meeting. Sarah Cole joins us monthly, and then also as needed. The ATC program, they also meet daily to talk about kids and how to best support, and then I meet with them every other week. The LEC team, teachers, we meet every Wednesday, and we'll go through our students, the advisees and teachers will be like, I'm concerned about this person. How are they doing in your class? What's going on? Just the discussion, and then on the next day, I meet with our school counselor, our therapist from Greater Valley, and our SBOT therapist, and then we sit down and talk about the students that were brought up. Who's working with this person? Does this person need to be connected? Do we need to call their outside therapist? Like whatever it is to kind of help them. Or is it an attendance issue, and then I need to intervene on that. We are very lucky for our other systems of support or of community members. We have the Student Health Center, so we have Greater Valley there. We have just started, we've been doing it about 5 weeks now, where we have partnered with oxytocin, and they're doing a chemical dependency group on site. We have a parenting group for our parents or soon-to-be parents that meet in our building every other week. My big drive with Linderman, as many of you have heard, is I want to remove all the barriers possible and have services on site for our students. So that's how we support Linderman. Questions?
So when the students first show up, do you enter into a contract with them similar to the monitoring that you're talking about, or is that monitoring the initial contract and then there might be follow-up ones to convey the importance of focus?
Mm-hmm. So during the enrollment appointments, they meet with either myself or the counselor, and all students sign contracts. So they know about the level systems. Our big thing at Linderman is, in order to be successful, you just need to do the basics. You just need to do your ABCs. A, you have to attend. B, you have to be respectful and responsible. C, you have to complete your weekly goals. So we often are asked, where in the ABCs are you struggling with? This is what you need to do. Attend, be respectful, responsible, complete your goals. So that's the first initial contract that they sign, and then as they go more, they'll get more specific.
How big a problem is that 80-person wait list? Like, are there 9th or 10th graders who, if they were just there for a month or a semester, would then reintegrate well? Or is it actually good to have them to have time to think, do I really want this before they get accepted into Linderman? Or what are your, should we be just thinking about building a second Linderman, since you like to stay small? You know, what are your feelings about that wait list?
Yeah, well, you definitely have to stay small, because otherwise you lose the one-on-one and the personal relationships, and that's foundation. I do think that every student should start out at the traditional high school, because some people who may have struggled, they just need to find their niche. So, the fact that we have this waiting list, I don't think that that's a bad idea, because some kids are calling to get on the waiting list because they just had a fight with their friends, not necessarily because they need something different. So they just need a little bit of time to work on it. But in some ways, I know that we do lose a couple kids as well because the wait was too long. So trying to find that balance is something that we're always working with, and also working with the traditional high schools on how to best support those kids that they know are on our waiting list, to ensure that they're continuing in school.
Going back, following up with her question, what do you think the optimum size is for alternative education facility like that as far as the student population goes? Have 160, is it 150, is it 200?
Our building right now is at 230, or we will be once we bring in our kids, we'll be close to like that 225, and that is optimal. We are the second largest alternative school in Montana. Paris Gibson and Great Falls is the largest. And when they get to 250, 275, it's way too big. Missoula, Willard is probably about 120, and they could probably have a little bit more. So I think for us, it's optimal. It would be hard to get much bigger.
The reason why I'm asking that is I've read some private industry.
Jack, would you turn on your microphone? Thank you.
I've read some private industry studies about optimal operation sizes, and they talk about 150. So I didn't know if there's any correlation between 150 employees and 150 students as far as being able to work with everybody closely.
And that's what we do. We look at our teacher-student ratio. So if I can keep advisors to be 12 to 15, 1 to 12 to 15 is perfect. We have some classes that have about 20 kids in there, and that is too full. We try to keep 15 to 18, because if you can think, if you're your math teacher and all 20 people are in a different spot and half of them all in 8 different math classes, like that's really hard to be able to get to the questions. And so, again, 15 is where we would ideally like the 1 to 15, but sometimes we get to 18, and then sometimes we get to 20, but that's like my ultimate max for a teacher.
Last question, going back to the contracts, what percentage of students do you have to follow up with additional contracts because the first one doesn't work?
Oh, Jack, I don't know. I think there is a small percentage of our level 3s, and I could just make up a number. So I'm gonna say 15%, that move to level 4. And the majority of those will get off the level.
You had talked a little bit about, well, you talked a lot about the attendance factor, and you said we could reschedule. How many of the kids go all day? Like, do a lot of them go for not the full day? What would that look like?
So the majority of our students do go full day. But our full day can be a traditional 8:15 to 3:15. It could be 9 to 3. It could be 10 to 4. We're open until 5:30, so it can also be 12:20 until 5:30. So we have a long or variety. We probably only have maybe a handful of kids that are on partial days, and those are students who are almost done and they only have a couple classes. But we also have something called Work Complete, which is, an incentive program that we offer. So everybody has, an educational plan, and they are set to earn 3 to 3.5 credits a semester. That's the standard, that's what you do at a traditional school, but they also all have weekly goals. So if somebody comes in and they put a lot of effort in, and they get their weekly goals done by Wednesday or Thursday, they have 2 or fewer tardies, no unexcused absences, they can essentially earn Thursday and Friday off. So that kind of affects our attendance rate too, when you look at it, but they put in extra effort. They've got their weekly goals done early, they have been not tardy to class, they have no unexcused absences, and you have to be in school at least 3 days to make that happen. So if you miss Monday, you have to be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I don't know if that.
No, it does. I have, so like a little follow-up question, how, like, first period and the period right after lunch,
Mhm.
like, how much less attendance do you get? And do you set up schedules where, like, at the beginning of the day, there are things that aren't class, or does class start first period?
Our traditional day starts at 8:15, but what we are finding, because we have about 75 kids that come from the ATC, and the ATC goes from 9 until 3.
Okay.
So a good chunk of our students choose to start at 9.
Okay. And then they're more likely to be there.
Yep.
Not from experience or anything.
Any other questions?
How difficult is it to find the teachers that work well with the students that you have versus the teachers that are in a traditional high school structure?
I feel very, very fortunate that I have, excellent teachers who want to be in our setting. They want to get to work with kids, they want to be able to build relationships with kids, and they want to be able to help them move forward. If you are a teacher who likes being in the classroom, likes talking about all your wisdom that you have, and engaging in group conversations and stuff like that, Linderman is a hard adjustment, because when you walk into our school, and I invite all of you to come at any time, it's very quiet. Except for passing period, it's not quiet during passing period. But kids just plug in, they just do work. So we don't have group activities, we don't have the teacher, talking about, the Battle of the Bulge, or whatever they're talking about. Like, it is, you're sitting down and doing your individual stuff and working one-on-one. So if that's a component that you like, it's good. But if you like to be up and building relationships based on content, it makes it a little bit harder.
You were talking about how you like all your programs within your, is there something that you're missing that? Program or?
I have almost all of my, I should say this, I have almost all of my wish list taken care of for my students, but there are 3 things still on there. One, I would love to have a daycare, which I don't have room, so we need to buy a house across the street. You're the finance guy, right? Didn't you just tell me that? Okay, that's what I was like. 2, and Pete and I have talked about this, about having some sort of career tech center or more hands-on learning for our students. They struggle with sometimes going back to their home high schools, like they left them, so to go back for the woods class or the auto class or the welding, have a few. I've got 3 kids in housing construction right now, but it's hard for them to get connected if they weren't already connected into that beforehand. So I would like that. And then I want a dropout recovery adult ed center, so I can bring back some of these older kids that have left, or even, a 40-year-old who just has 3 credits to graduate with their high school. Those are the 3 things overall, but finance guy, where's the paper to me?
I'll get it written.
Ask for a swimming pool, come on.
I don't want a swimming pool because then I have to be reliable and somebody would drown, and I don't want that.
How many of your students are parents?
Oh, I think I currently have, I have 3 students who have children, and, a couple that are expecting. So we average 5-ish.
And do you typically lose students if they're like, you have other kids who drop out because they?
I've had one this year have been withdrawn. There were other things in that, but that's part of the process.
Any other questions for Jody? I just have a comment. I think, School District 5 is very fortunate to have the LEC. It's just one more option for the kids, you know, that just don't fit into traditional education. And I know I have been over at LEC before I was in this role, when I was teaching many times. And yes, a lot of our students have to wait a while, but not nearly as long as I had expected. And just watching, you know, the relationships that have been built over there between the teachers and the students, it's amazing to see it, and I feel very fortunate that we have that program, so.
This
Thank
is like my dream job.
Yeah.
Which is a reality, so it's not even really a dream.
And you're good at it.
Okay,
Thanks, Joe.
thank you, Jody. Okay, next up is public comment. At this time, the board will allow 15 minutes for comment on public matters that are not on the main agenda. Members of the audience are encouraged to briefly address the trustees on an issue that is not on the agenda. The chair of the board, me, will seek comments from the audience on significant items as they occur. Public matters do not include any pending legal matters, private personnel issues, or private student issues. Please do not attempt to address such issues at this time, or you will be ruled out of order. Please note that individuals will be given 3 minutes for public comment. Public comment will also be allowed near the conclusion of the meeting for those wishing to give public comment, but were unable to do so at the beginning of the meeting. So do we have any public comment at this time? Please step to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Jared Stump. I want to thank the board for your time and all of your hard work. I'm a teacher at Glacier High School. I've been teaching there since 2008, and I got to tell you, I love my job. So just to start with, I want to let you guys know. I'm here today because I was very disappointed to see the superintendent's email. When I first read the news, it made me really sad, and I wondered how it would affect all the teachers in the district. I knew it would affect me and change how I've done things over the last 10 years. His email said, and I quote, "We recognize the benefits that the print shop has allowed us to experience, but also are faced with a reality that this is not a fiscally sound model of operation for our district." He later added, and I quote, "It is our intent to do everything we can to support the transition to printing at the building level or looking for our alternative solutions to printing." I realize that to some, this may seem like small hanging fruit for budget cuts, and I can understand that maybe some of the old school teachers need to look at printing less and doing less on paper, maybe more on the digital age. But over all the years I've been teaching since 1999, I kind of disagree that we need to have kids looking at screens and phones more often at this point in time. And I think it's just something that all teachers have the ability to do anything they want. And I really appreciate the support that they've had over the last 10 years. I know how busy the print shop has been over all the years, especially to help teachers get ready for the busy beginning of the school rush. And just, it seems like there's huge amounts of orders that get put into there. And the gal that was working there, Danette and Abnett, did a great job for years and years. It just seems like every 10 minutes a teacher is standing at a printer waiting for a print job is 10 minutes that they can't be actively engaging with students, you know, creating lesson plans, doing analytics on student, achievement, collaborating with others, all those things that is the magic of the school district. So, my concern is that it just adds one more task for teachers to burden at each of their local buildings, and many are already doing a lot of their own printing. I see them walking back and forth a lot. At Glacier High School, we have porches, so there's a pretty good access to printers, and it's amazing how much commotion can happen on a daily basis, waiting for the printer. You printed 150 of these? Are you kidding me? Who didn't put paper in the thing? Come on, let's, you know. So again, it's interesting, and that's all while the schools, while school's happen. You know, and we're actively engaging with students at the time sometimes when that's going on. We get one prep a day, which is a 50-minute prep where I work, and it seems like those prep periods are being eaten away more and more just with little things, little emails and, you know, forms to fill out, and, you know, of course, checking with parents and students and just all of the things that have taken place. That has been growing over the last couple of decades.
30 seconds.
You got it. But that's my concern, and I would really just like to urge the school board to reconsider shuttering the doors to the print shop, maybe rather look at staffing it differently, maybe taking some part-time personnel, making them full-time to staff that, maybe hiring a student, $13 an hour to come in and do printing at the different buildings. We're doing that in the custodial department already, and maybe even doing a work-based learning project for students that want to shadow IT or you know, administrative assistance, because that's important work. So I thank you for your time and I appreciate your listening.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Any other public comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on. Human resources and personnel action items.
Yep, microphone. In front of you tonight is routine, action items for certified, classified, and special hires, for our district. You'll see there's a few retirements and resignations and, some new hires happening. So we're excited about the new hires. Looking for approval from the board for that.
I move to approve the, the personnel action as presented.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll combine clarification and deliberation all into one discussion.
I have a question, Sue.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Micah, I see Ben Dorrington. You gonna fill that position again, or what's?
Yeah, we hope to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? This is an action item, so is there any public comment? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Next up, additional FTE requests for bus drivers.
Denise and I'll tag team that,
Okay.
if it's okay, Sue?
Okay, great.
We have a request to move two, .5 FTE bus drivers that are currently working for us to full-time drivers, and the idea is we backfill with, new drivers to fill the .5 positions. We've had a need, the reality is we've been already filling those schedules with just current, demand with student activities, but we've also increased the amount of, K-8 student extension activities. And so we're using a lot of the time for our regular route drivers that are driving routes in the morning, and then we schedule those extensions as soon as the bus is back. They take an extension activity, they get back, and then run the PM. So I think we're running about as efficiently as possible with the number of drivers and buses we have, and Ann and Annie do a fantastic job down there managing all of that, working through the reality of drivers, and this is a good opportunity to do.
This is the time for the board to ask questions, informational questions about the proposal. Go ahead, Ursula.
Have we been able to staff the position with this, once opens it up, were we able to get all the staff for bus drivers?
We currently have 3 drivers that drive, 0.5, so half-time,
Mhm.
and 2 of the 3 have expressed interest in taking the full-time, spot. And then we advertised for the, 2 open half-time positions that would create. And there is some interest in doing that, but that is a continued problem. Every time we have a bus driver retire, you know.
Everything is full right now, but when we open it, but right now,
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, and we actually have 2 of the 3 that are committed to applying for the.
Any other questions? Will?
We have room in our budget.
Well, this will be in the transportation budget.
Any other questions? Anybody comfortable making a motion? Thank you, Jack. Is there a second? Give that one to Jennifer, okay? This is an action item, so, it's not a, oh, never mind. Out of practice. So is there any public comment? Seeing none, in the other deliberations, this would be the time that the board can say, I've been talking to people in the community, here's what I'm hearing. Are we considering, you know, their, thoughts and their concerns? Okay, is there any deliberation?
I realized that it would be our group came and talked to us. Are you?
Yes. So it's been moved and second, oh,
I'm glad to hear that we are, doing more K through 8, activities on the buses during the day. That's an awesome addition, so glad to hear that's working well.
good point. Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Next up, additional FTE needs, special ed, pre-K to 12.
Hey, hi, everybody.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you. All right, let me just test this real quick. Okay, we'll go old school. So tonight's request has been, really, normally I would say vetted through committee meetings, but honestly, I was soliciting feedback. I was soliciting feedback on the two-part proposal. I met with Special Services Committee, I met with Personnel Committee, and then Finance. And so I'm sorry if this is a repeat for you, but I'm hopeful to share some information. There's not a presentation that I have done in the district since we adopted the strategic plan where I wasn't really intentional about sharing the connection. And so the Special Services Department really focuses primarily in these 3 goal areas. And tonight's request to staff special ed appropriately will hit all 3. Okay, so it is 2 parts. So I'll start with one request at a time, and really share. The first is a restructuring at the elementary level of our special ed resource program, supports and services. And the second is to add a special education supervisor position. With each of these requests, I'll kind of share a current reality, a rationale, some comparative data, and then financial impact, if any. Please know that neither of these requests impact the general fund. Okay, so the first one, I just wanted to give a general idea of like what is special services and what's the difference between special services and special education.
So special services are really the umbrella term for all these key departments. Systems of support, I share responsibility with both the assistant superintendents and the principals, special education 504, English language learners, families in transition, which are kids and families who might be in the foster care system, delinquent and or homeless or McKinney-Vento youth. And then I also supervise and collaborate with our school nurses and health programs. The largest and most complex department really is our special education department. And so down here, I just shared some data from the last 3 years in terms of how our numbers have grown. So you'll see we've gone from about 722 students as of child count to 825. And since child count, we're probably up to about 840 students with IEPs in the district. So this first request, based on these numbers and based on these level of needs, is really to move towards a model at the elementary level where our 3 largest elementaries have additional resources and support. So the current reality at Peterson, Rankin, and Edgerton is that there's 1 resource teacher and 2 paraeducators, and that resource teacher has currently 30-plus students. If I were to look at case management norms at this level, at the elementary level, they should each have about 15 students to start the year, hopefully no more than 20 by the end of the year. The other piece to this is, due to high numbers, we're moving kids out of neighborhood. So as Edgerton has just blossomed, we're seeing if families who are transitioning mid-year, if they'd be willing to go to Russell or go to a different school who has lower numbers. So it creates a scenario where kids are outside of their home school, which is never ideal. You know, we want kids to be able to make friends in school and then go home and play with those same kids in their neighborhood. Just to give you a snapshot in the middle here, what does it look like? What does the average resource room IEP look like? Typically, it's a student, let's just take a student with a learning disability, who might have reading goals and math goals, and maybe they have some goals around social emotional learning or organization. So the average amount of time on their IEP might be 2 hours a day. And if you multiply that by 30 students of a case manager at one of those 3 big schools, it's 60 hours per day. If you broke that time into 6 periods, it could be 10 students per period covering reading, writing, math, all those different goal areas, evaluations, IEPs, progress reports, master schedule constraints. So just because I want 10 kids in a period doesn't mean it's going to land that way. If I can't pull my this class, and this class, I might have 17, or I might have 3. And then the biggest is if I'm one resource teacher and we have early K programs, I'm teaching across 7 grade levels, 6 to 7 grade levels. And so it just becomes an impossible job when you have 30-plus students. So when I come back to that first slide around our strategic plan, or that second slide, and then meeting the needs of their IEP, individualized education plans, and this idea that we're really going to personalize learning, it becomes a really challenging task to do when you have that many students. So the idea on the next slide is to really restructure the model. So instead of having, if we look under the proposed change, instead of having 1 special ed teacher with 2 paras, which is 3 adults per school, we'd still have 3 adults, but we'd go to 2 special ed case managers and 1 paraeducator. This leaves the most highly skilled person with probably about 15 students to start the year, kind of to get back to that norm. If you go to the next slide, it kind of captures really what we're essentially trying to do. We would be looking at taking 1 FTE and just transferring it. So easy peasy, I can do that, no cost to the district. The second component would be shifting the cost of 3 paraeducators towards 2 resource teachers. I just want to stop and say here, our paraeducators in these programs are amazing humans. And I don't want to talk about them as if we're just shifting them here and they have no voice and choice in this. So I would use like Jen as an example at Edgerton. We have 2 resource room paras. There's a great possibility that there might be an instructional para position, another opening at Edgerton, that this person might be really excited about joining. So the idea would be we'd shift them to open spots that they have some voice and choice in. The anticipated cost savings there of that would be about $107,000. Salary and benefits, that's 2, and this is like worst case scenario, if we bring someone in with the most years in benefits, would be around 110 to 150. So if you come down to the middle, it's probably the easiest place to look. Best case scenario, there's no cost increase to the district at all. If we hire 2 resource teachers who have a few years experience and maybe just need single coverage, be a cost to the district. If we bring 2 people in at the absolute max and they have family benefits, let's say, the worst case scenario cost to the district would be $42,600. Again, it wouldn't impact, general fund, we'd be looking at Medicaid dollars, and then I included Medicaid fund balances. So we've got probably $350,000 in reimbursements that come in annually in addition to the fund balance. So I think it's a safe bet. Any questions on, well, I'll hold on that just because you've got a routine. I'm gonna go right into this one and then we'll take questions afterwards. The second was a totally different part of the proposal, is the special ed supervisor proposal, primarily serving special programs. When I say special programs, I'm really talking about life skills and Aspire programs. You're going to see on the next slide some comparisons to AA districts, and I do that out of due diligence to really be able to check ourselves in terms of what's appropriate and what are other districts spending. But really the reason for the ask is not because all the other AAs are doing it. It's because between Alice and I, the 2 only central office folks overseeing special ed, we've hit a tipping point. We're just not able to support staff and principals well. And what that means when we can't support staff and principals well is that they can't support kids well. And it's these district programs that are so complex and need that guidance. They need side-by-side coaching around academic and behaviors. They need help facilitating those complex IEP meetings. So the idea would be this administrative position would really support those special programs, K-12. This is the comparative data, and so you'll just see all of the other AAs listed, and there's anywhere from 1 to 4 coordinators or supervisors at almost all of the AAs. They range from administrative to certified salary contracts. We're recommending administrative. When I spoke with Bozeman, for instance, who is 4 certified kind of instructional leaders, the director said they're amazing people, but it doesn't take a lot off my plate because they don't have administrative responsibility. So the anticipated cost, when I met with our central office team, and we really just looked at the scope and complexity of this individual's work, we aligned them with an assistant principal on the matrix at the middle school level, since they will be serving a wide range. This would be a 223-day contract paid for out of the tuition fund. So it would become part of base program costs permissively levied out of tuition. Again, would not impact general fund. That's it, thank you. If approved, this would be the tentative timeline. It goes over when I met with subcommittees. Today is the 23rd. If this goes through, I would post ASAP, just because finding and recruiting positions like this is really, really challenging. With the idea of identifying stakeholder group and process by the 24th, working through that process and approving hire at the April meeting. Okay, that was a ton of information. I moved quickly because most of you have heard it. I thought it was quick. It had been. Any questions?
Ursula?
I haven't heard it, I know, I'll try to keep it short, because I assume when I put the 3 committees, most people have been there. The only school that you're changing paras for specialists is at Edgerton, is that correct?
So the 3 big elementary schools, those resource programs have 2 paras in each. So we'd be pulling 1 para from each of those programs and reassigning. And the idea would be, we already know of several para positions that will be vacated that those folks could move into through attrition.
So will there be less people overall doing the position?
It'll still be 3 people at those schools, but instead of 1 teacher and 2 paras, it'll be 2 teachers and 1 para.
Okay, but even with it being the 2 teachers and the 1 para, there's a chance it will be cost neutral?
Correct, yes. Because of those positions, of those 3 resource positions, 1 of them is being moved from a totally different program over.
So there'll be like one less para in general, but not in the special, not in the special ed.
One of the current sped teachers,
Mm-hmm.
so it'll be 3 new special ed teachers.
Mhm.
One of them is already on staff. We only need to hire 2
Okay,
special ed teachers, but the para is vacating position.
okay, okay, so that's how it switches.
I just want to make a point of clarification here. We will have 2 motions for this request. Okay, the first one on our agenda is for the additional FTE for the pre-K through 12, the special ed supervisor. Okay, so let's do our questions related to that position first, and we'll vote on that, and then we'll come back around to the additional FTE.
So the first part we'll talk about is the second.
Right, right, okay, make sense? So is there any questions on the pre-K to 12 special education supervisor position? Yeah,
Okay,
go
I have a
ahead,
I have a
Ursula.
question for that one too.
Yeah.
You said that you went to the committee meetings and talked to people. When you were talking with the special ed teachers and paras, is it like, I just want to make sure that if we're spending resources, that there's enough in the classroom before we add another administrative. Like, I understand that both the needs are there, but if I had to choose, I would maybe.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Ursula. It's actually been my approach. I've had several people ask, like, why haven't you asked for this sooner? The size of our district, it's not just our double A's, but really, there's very few states that have numbers like this and just have one director and one office manager. It's not super realistic, and the question was, why haven't you asked for this sooner? And it was for the exact reason you're stating. Like, this board has been so supportive of making sure that our special ed teachers and paraeducators, that we have enough of that personnel in our programs before we were to ever look at this position. And I can tell you the responses I actually got when I asked folks was, do you want us to show up to the board meeting? Should we write letters? What can we do in support of this? Which, it kind of gives me goosebumps just talking about it, because it just, shows the trust that they have in this recommendation. There was no support. I didn't have anybody that expressed.
Any other questions? Jack?
Because of the federal legislation that created the IDEA and the ADA and the increase in students that require IEPs, where do you see the future going with this because of the liabilities that are associated with not making sure that there's deliberate actions to support the individuals that are on IEPs?
I feel like, at least in the state of Montana, with so much changing, like, I've been really hopeful. I'm hopeful with transformational learning moving towards a personalized, competency-based system. We can personalize the language that we speak. In 2013, when, at the legislative level, they came up with permissive levies through the tuition fund to cover the costs of complex students who, need far more than just an average student, I think is promising that has sustained, for a long period of time. So, I think that we're just growing, and we're just gonna have to keep being responsive to the growth and to the needs, and, I'm confident that we can do it.
Nice job with those acronyms. Any other questions? Is somebody comfortable making a motion on this first item?
I move to approve the, kindergarten to 12 special education supervisor position.
Thank you, Jack. Is there a second? Thank you, Scott. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment Seeing none, is there any deliberation? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Next, we will do the special education, additional certified FTE. Any questions from the board?
This is elementary only.
And elementary only. Anybody comfortable making a motion?
I move that we approve the additional certified FTE as part of K-5 elementary special education resource.
Thank you, Ursula. Is there a second? Thank you, Jennifer. It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Seeing none, any deliberations?
I'm happy that this is coming up. I know the paras are very capable, but it always seems like a lot to ask the para to carry this much weight in.
Great. Any other deliberations? All in favor, please say aye. Elementary only.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously.
I know I say this often, but I really, truly appreciate your support. I know our special educators do too. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up, I can hardly even say this, superintendent resignation.
Well, I
You
think,
weren't on the resignation before.
yeah, it wasn't on the regular board action items for personnel. And I think, as many of you know, it's hard to, outpace the media and social media and Twitter and Facebook, when it comes to these kind of things. But I've endeavored to communicate with the board, ahead of time, my intentions. And, I have, officially accepted, a position with Missoula County Public Schools as their next superintendent. They actually won't ratify that until their March 28th, board meeting. So, this is a little cart before the horse, but, was, selected there. And, oh, you didn't have to pull that up. Yeah, we have to make it official. The board does have to, accept, my resignation. It is, bittersweet, to, think about moving on. Been afforded so many great, opportunities, in this district. When I started, 22 years ago, teaching, basic and novice English courses and a school within the school, for at-risk youth, at Flathead High School. Even though it took 3 times for Cali to actually hire me.
Only
yeah.
took us twice.
Anyway, yeah, this is my resignation and, asking for the board's support in that.
And I will make the first comment on this, in that I am very reluctant to accept this resignation. I know I don't really have a choice in the matter. I, of course, wish Micah the best, in this new adventure. But I am, very sad to see you leave. I was in Helen at the time when, he told me, and I could barely, participate in what I was there for, because I was just, have 101 things, going through my mind at the time. And next up on the agenda is when we will get into some of those nuts and bolts of things that we have to do to move on. But, Micah, I will miss you very much, and appreciate everything you've done for the district. Okay?
Thank you.
Leave a big footprint. So, any questions? Comments?
Oh, we can say no.
You know, Jack, what happens if we do? I know, I know, it's, yeah. Okay, I don't see any questions, comments? Okay, this is an action item, so is there any public comment?
Hi, I'm Sean Pandina from Kalispell. Well, I first met Micah in August of 2020, and the two high school students were attempting to attend class here in person, and came with a medical note, which Micah made very clear that the medical note was not going to allow them to attend here with their masks off. And I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt at the time, thinking, well, he's probably just following the board policy, and started attending these board meetings after that because of, you know, how exactly what was going on and wanted to know more. But then, in February of 2021, we all had a special board meeting to, in the theater, the theatrical board meeting, I call it. And in person, it was kind of a split, 50-50, between whether the public wanted masks to stay on the kids or not. However, the emails for that particular board meeting came in about 75 to 25%. I wanted to do a little bit further digging on that, so I did a public information request for those emails, because there was an email sent out to the entire district announcing the meeting, and in that email it said you put your name, your name and your address, because that was going to be part of the public comment. Well, when those minutes came, when those emails came out in the minutes, they didn't have that information, so I asked for it. And I was told that that wasn't going to be provided because it was against policy, even though everybody knew full well that that was going to be part of it. And on top of that, it was a lot of money that Micah told me I'd have to pay to get the emails, and he wasn't even going to give me the information that would prove that those emails didn't come from that time frame. So, in my opinion, I can't prove it because I don't have the emails, but there was some fraud that went on right there. There was some deception. This whole board was deceived. Well, not everybody was here at that time, in that email, in that meeting, because I don't believe those emails were really the way they were. I encourage you to go back and look at those emails, because some of them just said, thank you. That was an email in support. Thank you for what? It didn't have any context before or after, but that went down as an email in support of keeping masks on the kids. So, I don't think you should accept this resignation. I really don't. He was just extended with a raise, 3 years.
30 seconds, Sean.
And, you know, it's kind of a slap in the face to the whole board. You know, you were throwing him a, hey, you're guaranteed to have this job for 3 years and a raise, and then he's like, sorry, I'm moving on somewhere else. I don't know how much they're paying him, but it's probably a lot more. And I just don't think you should accept his resignation. I think you should investigate the man and those emails if there was fraud.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Is that part of your conditioning?
You got it, Jack. I am Ben Young. Wasn't planning on speaking, but I wanted to be the last word on being a teacher that has worked with Mr. Hill, being a parent who has had students in the care of Mr. Hill's wife, my own sons, and I want to thank you for for your leadership and your time that I've been serving with you, and for your guidance and for your support. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. Young? Any other public comment? Seeing none. Somebody comfortable making a motion?
I move to accept Mike's resignation.
Thank you, Jack. And okay,
Were you gonna second it?
I was. I don't usually, the chair doesn't usually get to, but they can second it. So I would like to reluctantly second the motion. Okay, any other deliberations?
I just wanted to say that, for me, it's a lot like a student, you know, you see them come in, and you see them grow in their position, and you wish them well on their next venture, although there are times when I have said to students too, could you just fail a class and stay another year? But we can't do it with you any more than we can do it with our student population, so we're always happy to see people grow and move up.
Thank you, Rebecca. Anything else? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Yes, reluctantly, yeah. Next up, anticipated superintendent search. Who's doing this one?
You.
I know, is it me? I can, you want to start? You want, I'll do it. Superintendent search, and we, I have met with a couple of the administrators, some of the board members. We have, put together a tentative timeline that we presented to the personnel committee. But we kind of have to do twofold. We have to accept the timeline, and then this is really out of our wheelhouse. I mean, there's only a couple of us who have been involved in the superintendent search before. And, you know, we don't have an HR director right now, so we really need some help doing this. It is a time-consuming process, and all hands on deck. It is our responsibility. It's probably the most the most serious responsibility we have as trustees is to select the superintendent. So we sent out a draft timeline, and I hope you all got a chance to take a look at that. Personnel committee, you know, has looked at it and approved it. The bottom line is we would like to have somebody hired by May 9th, which is a very compressed search for this type of a position. And then starting a contract July 1. Because it is so compressed, you know, we are going to have to spend some time doing this. Interviewing, getting the word out. So does anybody have any questions on the timeline that we have put together, or what else? You know, one thing we didn't want to skimp on, I will say, is that we didn't want to skimp on the community involvement part of this. We still have, you know, a survey that's going to go out. We're going to have a focus group. So we will still have the community involvement, which is an important part. We want to know what are the qualities, you know, you would like to see in our next superintendent. So we wanted to maintain that, and look at the survey, get it, you know, get the information out there to the right people nationwide. But the thought was, we don't want to just hire somebody to fill this position. We want the right person for this. We want the right fit. we have a couple big projects going on right now that are not going to stop. And so we want somebody who can hit the ground running, shares our, values and our philosophy about education. So, it's going to, work for us, but, you know, we have other options if we don't find somebody the first round. I mean, you heard me kid Micah that it took us 2 tries before we hired him, because we didn't find anybody in the first round, so we re-advertised. Missoula did the same thing. Billings is struggling. There are currently, well, and I've heard everything from 16 to 40 superintendent positions open in Montana. You know, it's tough to find somebody for these positions. So this is our timeline. Do you want to add anything about the timeline?
I don't think so. When this process started, for me with Missoula, I met with Sue and talked to her about, you know, the potential in this becoming an eventuality. And so we put in some time, over the last 2 weeks in trying to put together a quality timeline that allowed the board an opportunity to hire someone, on a somewhat shortened timeline, but also it gave a little bit of time still too, if you weren't able to select someone out of that first round, if there was, you know, a chance to reopen or consider other options. And so, again, I think for the board, this is a really critical position that you want to hire for, and you want to make good choices with good information. It was my recommendation to Sue to employ some sort of firm to assist. MTSBA has a pretty good track record. I think they helped. Well, I know they helped when you hired me, but also was employed to help when Mark Plateau was selected. So that is a strong encouragement for the board, because there's a lot of information gathering and collating of information, and they do the background checks. And then they also help the board stay within the guardrails when it comes to employment law and relations. So that would be a strong recommendation, and that's why the motion tonight is to approve a search firm to assist the board with selecting a new superintendent. We have shared the timeline draft. MTSBA and Kalispell law offices, who both do it locally, have said they could work with that. And we've got the job posting pretty much ready to go. Putting some new pictures in there. You can see it just put in the draft, and so we're pretty much ready to do this now that I've officially resigned and you've accepted that. So then that can move this process forward. It does, on the timeline, we've put in a couple extra meetings for the board, just because it will take time when you're screening applicants and actually conducting interviews, and you're arranging for meet and greets and all sorts of other stuff that comes along with the typical superintendent search.
And, you know, we looked at the last timeline when we hired Micah, and there's a lot more detail in it, and because we've compressed this, we have a compressed timeline, but we have kept all the key features in it. I have talked with both MCSBA and Kalispell Law Firm, who have both offered to do the search for us, and can both work with the time frame. There are a few concerns and questions in some of these details about doing some of these things in executive session. I would like to be very transparent in this process. Full disclosure, of course, you probably are all aware that I am currently the president-elect for MTSBA, will be the president in 2025. So I have a little bit of a bias there, but I also think with our compressed timeline, I think that could be advantageous. I will just say that out loud. But, it's, it's up to you. It's who we're most comfortable with. MTSBA has done this in the past. And I know, I talked with Bea too, and she's got a group of people who can work on this. So, I mean, we can't really go wrong with it. It is gonna cost some money. Bea will charge by the hour, and she gave me a ballpark figure of about $5,000 for her search. MTSBA will cost about $7,500. But I think MTSBA has a lot of things they can build into the search for us. But questions? Rebecca?
Is MTSBA's number the full cert, until we have somebody hired, or is it for the first round of applicants?
That is a good question. It's till we hire somebody.
Sophia's number might be higher if we went into.
Because the last time, we had to do the exact same thing. And, the second round is usually a little shorter than the first one, but, yeah.
Is, MTSBA currently helping other districts find their superintendents? Like, is it too much for them to find 40 superintendents?
Yeah, they are not doing all 40. They have, I think, 8 in the hopper right now, which is a lot for them, and I know that was our concern going with them. And they have assured me, that they can jump in tomorrow and get started on it and get finished with it. Because they are involved a lot with the legislature right now, they've got a lot on their plate.
Really quick while I still have it, I just want to kind of echo what you said. I think it's really, like, it's great to have a timeline so that we, get the ball rolling and we get moving. But I think we really need to be careful and not try to rush it. Like, it's really important that we find the right person. And I think it's really important that a lot of the sessions where we do kind of interviewing, things like that, are open to the public. I think the more transparency that we can have as a district right now, the better off we're going to be.
Mhm. Other questions? Ursula, and then Lloyd.
So the motion is just to start hiring to a firm, but I have a question about the time. Is that appropriate here?
Yes.
So I know we're trying to compress it, but one of the parts that I saw that was not specifically on here that I thought was really very helpful during the last time was when we had the interviews, when we had the people actually here in town, they did a day where they went around to schools, and then we were able to get feedback from, I didn't see it on there.
Right there on the May 2nd special board meeting for interviews, a complete schedule for that day would be forthcoming to include meet and greet, building tours, et cetera.
Okay, so the special board meeting, but the interviews is not just us, they'll do, the idea is to still do the meet and greet, and then also at, like, some time between there, which is a given, but the feedback that we got from teachers and administrators during the meet and greet, I think is really important. So I just would not, I want to make sure that we fit that in, even though it's all really quick. I thought that was one of the most useful bits.
Great, thank you, Ursula. And we had talked about, combining some of that with the survey, with the focus groups, and, yeah, then with the meet and greet. Lloyd, you had a question or comment?
Yes, with the stakeholder groups, what are stakeholder groups and how, like, is it everybody, all voters, or how's that work?
Yeah, certainly the board could define it, any way they want, but I would consider students to be a stakeholder group, families, parents to be a stakeholder group, the business community, teachers, administrators. You could really start to dice it down, but pretty much anybody in the community, that wants to have some input.
Do we put that out as like an electronic to everybody, or how's that, or do we target certain areas with like 50 or 50 there?
Yeah, that would be the responsibility of MTSBA to ensure that however they want to collect that information and from whom. The survey, and I can just tell you from past experience, when we had stakeholder group meetings, when the position first opened, I went to one of them, I think there were 3 or 4 of us there. They weren't well attended for the in-person stuff. But then the surveys actually is a great way to gather quite a bit of information from people. But still would encourage you to have an in-person stakeholder, feedback collection. When MTSBA did it, Deborah Stoke was the one who, was there asking the questions and collecting the data and collating those responses and getting back to the board.
My other question is for executive session and determining finalists, may I ask why we would have to do that in executive session of personal information, or why wouldn't we make that choice and just, if there is any personal information, just cover that in a short executive?
Yeah, there's different ways to do that. MTSBA recommends to do any deliberations publicly, but sometimes in employment information, there is public's right to know versus the individual person's right to privacy. And so you have to honor that component of the law as well. Completing an application, and even like with Missoula, they took my resume and they posted it on their website. So I mean, there's going to be stuff that'll be out there that's certainly public information.
And just so you know, Lloyd, I have those executive sessions circled on here because that is something we will have to, discuss down the road. Yeah. Rebecca?
I'll go up to you. It's actually a follow-up to Jennifer's question. With MTSBA doing 8 other searches, have they reached out to the pool that they know of, so we would just be getting the people who weren't hired by the other 8? Or do you, there's concern that they've just done 8, that, what is their reach, and we'd be hitting the same people up who, or do you think that there would be meaningful new reach to a search for us?
I think either firm we go with, MTSBA or BIA, is going to have similar reach. And they, we have some specific needs based on our strategic plan, and they do look at that. But yeah, it is a concern because we don't want to get just recycled applicants. Yeah. There was I thought somebody else, and then Lloyd. Okay. Heather?
Okay, so what all does it entail? If we go with MTSB or BIA, what do they do during this process? I'm just not
Headhunter, essentially. They act as our headhunter.
But they're also setting out, the survey, they're doing that part. What else are they,
The big thing is background checks.
okay?
They will, publicize the opening, and then, when we make selections on the applicants we want to interview, they will do background checks for us. They have a lot of contact. Both of them do. Because BIA has done this before also. She did the one in Missoula. Yeah. So, when you look at, the other list we had, the first time we did it, a couple of years ago, it listed who did what, and I looked at my notes, and I said, wow, they really were doing a lot of things, including they put together that brochure.
Yeah.
MTSBA put together that brochure last time. Now, we have done all that, so that's just one less.
Yeah, MTSBA has a group of individuals that they task with certain components of the search. So, getting it out there both locally, in the state and then nationally, and then they'll work on the brochure and those kind of things. But then they can refine. They may actually ask the board, do you have any particular things that you want to survey stakeholders about? They might offer some suggestions, but they would be the ones to kind of pull that all together so that when the board is selecting candidates for interview and ultimately deliberating and deciding, they're helping to kind of guide that. They can coalesce 1,000 responses in a survey into some key points for the board to consider. That this is what the community is asking for.
Jack?
BIA would be more likely to do headhunting than MTSB would be? don't get good applicants, we need to take that into account also. They can go out and talk to individuals. Might be a little more difficult under the MTSB model, but they do all the marketing, the advertising, they consolidate everything comes in, they participate in the stakeholders meetings, and they are present when we do the interviews. They're all open to the public, and they help guide us into those points where we need to go into executive session because of the topic. So they're a guide along the way, there, so it's hard to describe all the little nuances and steps along the way that they have. But yeah, it's necessary to go with somebody and spend the money to do that.
Lloyd?
My question with regard to that, how many, superintendent searches is BIA currently doing, or the, you know?
I don't know, do you?
I don't know how many she's doing. I've seen a couple of her advertisements come out, so I know she's helping with a couple of districts.
Something we can find out just to see what the comparison is as far as workload. That particular task.
I don't know if we'd have that information for you to make a decision tonight on who to go with or not.
Are we making
I
a
think,
decision of who to go with tonight, or just that we're going to?
We have to decide who, because if you look at the timeline, we're starting tomorrow.
what I would say is both have expressed that they have the capacity to do the search and do it well for the district.
Other questions? Ursula?
I was more of the comment. I'll wait. Do we make it now?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, obviously, I know very little. I've never worked with BIA, but it did feel like MTSBA did a lot last. Feel like a useful amount of support.
Mike, if it's too personal, say buzz off. Just since Jack said that BIA would, make personal phone calls to actually try and get us somebody if nobody good applied, did BIA call you about the Missoula position? And again, if that's a personal question, tell me that's not appropriate, but I just wanted to know how.
If he won't answer, I will.
Kind of a headhunter we talked.
I guess in full disclosure, the first person that contacted me was my son Noah. But yes, I was contacted.
With BIA?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That tipped the scales for me.
Any other questions? This isn't, Jack?
You have to remember that we can go through this search and have candidates and interview them all and say, nobody matches what we need. So, but we also have to know that we need to come up with alternative B if that doesn't work. So even though there's pressure to have a timeline and to pursue that, we don't have to have it be a final act by itself. And having been through 6 of them already, and the second one, we hired 2 people for 2 years. It was helped Joe and Bud at, and it worked well for that period of time, and that was back in 97, 98, I think it was. So there may be other options that we're not completely familiar with in order to get us through this. So, but we need to take the action to start it tonight and recognize that it doesn't have to be an absolute decision.
Jennifer?
I just have a question to follow up with that. You think then that, let's say we go through the search and we don't find anybody and we need to kind of have plan B. Do you think one of those firms is more equipped than the other to help us figure that out? What plan B could be?
I think they are both equipped to figure that one out. But the choice is really ours, what we want to do, if we want to redo the search, if we want to hire an interim, or, option D, E, and F.
I just wondered if maybe you thought, like, MTA.
I know, you'll get it eventually.
NTSB,
Jack still doesn't
maybe
get
just
it.
because they are just like more part of the school board association, right? Like, better equipped than the other firm at all.
Yeah. I am confident that
Either.
either one could do it, but. Any other questions?
So Jack, you've been through this the most, which way are you leaning? Like, we have to make a decision. Just help us out here.
My preference is B.
We do a straw poll of everybody's preference and see if.
And Louis?
I would just throw in, but I appreciate Jack's input on this, but, Montana School Board Association has worked with the board. I like the fact that they will pick up a lot of the HR, load, because right now we're director.
Yeah.
I think Montana School Board Association has a reach, it doesn't just because they are board association. Yet, but Jack does his thumb on the scale here.
Thanks, Lance. Any other comments, questions, Diane?
Well, I'll make a comment, but I could wait until deliberation
Okay.
as well.
We can't deliberate till we have a motion, we can't make a motion till we decide which motion we
Oh.
wanna make, so don't we
make it
need
now.
a straw
Don't
poll
hold back.
before
Okay.
we?
Don't
Can
hold
I
back.
make a motion?
Yeah,
Well, because you can always say, vote on no. Well, then, my personal preference, I'd make a motion to approve, hiring a search firm, MTSBA, to, begin with the selection of a new superintendent. That'd be the motion I would make.
okay. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Lance. This is an action item, so is there any public comment?
Did she actually make the motion or just say she would?
Okay, I will make a motion.
Okay, you're making a motion,
I am
okay.
making a motion.
Sorry, I just
Yeah.
didn't know if you were theoretical or not. I was-
Right.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so with Sue being the president-elect of the MTSBA, I think it's kind of a conflict of interest that she would even be promoting that here. I personally don't like the MTSBA. I don't think you guys should even be a part of it. Policies they hand out, I don't like that all their policies make every single school that's part of them have similar policies. I think down to local control, you should all be making policies that fit this school, not cookie cuttering it, doing it in cookie cutter for the entire district. And yeah, I think that it's a lower cost for what Jack's suggestion. I also think your motion should probably include, and it's been discussed, removing those executive sessions at least off that timeline. You know, you can always change it in the future, but if you put it down there like that and then say, oh, we'll discuss it later, and it just never gets discussed and it just stays in executive session, I think that's not very transparent to the public doing it in an executive session. I do understand if there's, you know, obviously you're not gonna share their social security number, their current address, but what, you know, I don't understand. Any other information should be clear to the public, like where they're coming from, what they've done. Who promoted the MTSBA, the main thing she said was background checks. Well, I do background checks in my business, for everybody that has to do business with me, and it costs about $25. So, I mean, I'll do them for $500 a piece if you want, and just, you know, pocket money, but that's just a joke. Anyway, I don't think that $7,500 just for, you know, background checks is money well spent. Because I'm sure the school, hiring teachers, has a tool to do your own background checks. I mean, I really hope you do, and I think I've actually heard it discussed in these meetings before, that the HR department does that, or maybe you outsourced it or something. I don't exactly remember, and I have to look back at my notes. But, yeah, I don't think that, is money well spent to do that. So, yeah, those are my suggestions. Hopefully you change the motion and, fix those items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pandina. Any other public comment? Seeing none, any deliberations?
Because we've seen other districts go into second searches, and there are some, I don't expect if Bia's number is for the first one, I expect her number will end up similar by the time we're done. So at first I was for NTSBA as they were, as they had an all-in-one inclusive price, and it might be a year before we find a final solution. But, the hourly does concern me. But Jack's statement that, I think we're gonna need a serious headhunter. I think we're gonna need somebody to be calling people across the country and saying, hey, this is a gem of a district, come here. We're awesome. So with Jack's comment, I did lean towards BIA over MTSB.
Jack, and then Lance?
Just looking at the timeline where it says April 11th, executive board session to review list of applicants. Those are all things that we'd be doing individually and not as a group. We get them all and we look at them, and then we can decide in an open session on that. So even though the phrase executive session was put there, there's times that we would be reviewing all the applicants individually. Or we can do it in an open session because the information we'd be looking at would all be public information anyways, so that's not a problem. With the April 18th, where it says special board meeting, executive session to determine finalists for the superintendent, that would probably, as far as I'm concerned, that's an open meeting. That's not an executive session. So I don't see, the only point in time that there would be an executive session in this whole process would be, like Sue identified earlier, if there's something that the candidate would want to disclose, but in an executive session. And that would be the only time it would need to be closed. Other than that, everything along this process would be open to the public. So I don't see the executive session being a stumbling block in the outline that's proposed here. I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Thanks, Jack. Lance?
Just kind of want to throw out a thought about, I know there's quite a few superintendent positions open, but I would say that we're a candidate competing for our position isn't there's going to be a special skill set out there. 14 AA districts in Montana. Most of the AA districts right now have us in place. So in some regards, we're not competing. Schools that need superintendent.
It was Missoula going into 2 searches.
Right.
8 AA districts.
8 AA districts.
Yeah.
14 high schools. Thanks.
Any other questions or deliberations? Okay, we have a motion on the table. It's been moved and seconded that we approve MTSBA as the search firm to assist the board with selecting a new superintendent. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Let's do a voice, a roll call vote. Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
Will?
Aye. Nay.
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 Aye.
Aye. What's the count?
Aye.
They're not in order.
It's 6 to 5. 6 to 8.
Okay, so that fails. So,
So should we make another motion?
Another motion's needed.
Jack,
I move that we hire Bia for the superintendent search.
Okay, is there a second? Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Lloyd. All in favor? Let's do a roll call vote. Scott?
Aye.
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 Nay. And I'm just trying to be as transparent as possible, letting you know my bias. I know I have it. And I have a lot of time I will spend, so thank you. Next.
Move on, can I ask a question?
No. Sorry. Notice of intent to impose non-voted levies, elementary.
Sue, did we, move the timeline? I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you. Who seconded that?
Jack.
Jack, okay. It has been, moved and seconded. Is there any,
That's actually what my question was about.
yeah,
So there was talk about executive session, we've hired assistant superintendents and principal, which, in general, when we have hiring decisions, are they in open session? When we have interviews? I assume as head of personnel, when we interview anyone, are they open sessions or are they closed?
Typically, the only open session interview is the board interview, because all of you will make that decision on.
No, I meant any other position we're hiring, because we're asking if we should have a private deliberation about hiring the superintendent. I was wondering if we have private discussions when we hire anybody, or
With other employees, but it's a recommendation that comes from that committee to the board for
Right, but
a hire, so then the board is the one that votes.
but when the whoever is on search for whichever position, is that open to anyone in the public? They're usually not.
So like right,
So to me, why would this one be open to the public when all the others are not, I guess?
Yeah, it's happening during an you're calling a special, you're calling a board meeting to have the interview.
Right, I was arguing for why we might have an executive session, like, it's pretty standard that interviews are,
but this is
Not
the
open
only
to public.
position the board hires.
right,
The other positions,
are hired by,
yeah, we just approved that recommendation.
right.
So we have to, and the board, as elected officials, we are responsible, for the public. And so we have to deliberate in public. And I think we have to be transparent in this. And
There's transparency,
You know,
but there's
you're-
also will people
BIA may
say what they
think
need to say.
differently,
Yeah.
part of it is,
I've been through it a couple of times. And, yeah, I mean, I think it's a common expectation is that you would interview in front of the board in a public meeting. And in some cases, like, I remember when I was hired, there was an opportunity for the public to give input, listen to someone say, hey, I think you should hire the other guy. And other people have said, we think you should hire Micah. So, it's okay. It's part of the process. I don't think anybody expects any differently when, doing a superintendent search.
So last time it was published, but then we did deliberate in an executive session. We did go into
Mm-mm.
we were in the conference room at some point
Yep.
talking about.
I think there was one question specific to, that was given to every single, person.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah, do you
Yep.
have anything you want to disclose?
yeah,
Okay.
and so you guys
Yeah.
took us back into a room, and
Okay,
it was
so
really
that was
nerve-wracking.
the only
Yep.
Okay,
But you did deliberate in open session.
okay. So does the timeline where it says executive session, does
We'll
do we need a
adjust that.
motion?
It's just-
Do we need a
it's just a
motion
draft.
that it's okay because it's a draft? Okay.
We'll refine things as we go.
Okay. So there is a motion to approve the timeline. Is there a second? Did Jack second that? Okay. Moved and seconded. Any public comment?
confused. I think you're still voting on the original one as it's written and haven't amended it to take out the executive session. I guess some clarification on that would be good.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Been moved and seconded that we, accept the timeline. All in favor, please
We
say
need to wait
aye.
for Jack to vote.
Yeah,
I'm just asking.
Because he made the motion.
He's probably out in the hallway talking to someone.
Uh,
He seconded it, he
Yeah.
only seconded it.
Well, we'll take a vote right now, and we'll get him when he comes back in. All in favor of the timeline, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we'll wait for the final tally till Jack comes in.
He said he seconded the motion.
Yeah, yeah. But still, we'll do the right thing.
Two, just, yeah, a second. What we are really improving in public is timeline, not necessarily. Timeline is what it is.
Good point.
We'll adjust the wording.
How do you vote, Jack?
I vote for the time.
For the timeline, yeah. Okay, motion passed unanimously. Okay, thank you. Next up, next business, notice of intent to impose non-voted levies, elementary only. Denise, are you doing this one? Yep.
Yes, I am, thank you. Can you hear me? Can't hear me. So the first attachment would be the levies that are, or the funds that are maintained at the elementary level. State law requires school districts by March 31st of every year, a schedule of levies that they intend to impose in the funds that are supported by levies. And so you see those listed there. Those are the ones listed in law. These are estimates. I just can't emphasize that more because the way the budget calculations work is we look at the end of the year fund balance, which for this year doesn't happen until 2020. We look at that ending fund balance, we look at it as reserves that we might take, and then there may be funds that might be reappropriated to, and that would impact these levy amounts. So to put this information out by March 31st, it's our best guess at this time. So the law also specifies the format that we present the information, so you see that up there. This template meets all the requirements spelled out in the law. So we list the funds that are involved, we list all the tax levy amounts and associated mills that are associated with the current year that we're in. And the purpose is to compare what we believe we might levy for 2024 to the current year. So that's what this does. The far right section, there are those projections for 2024. So I list the tax levy amount for each of these funds and the estimated mills. The law says we have to use the taxable value of the district for the year that we're in. We list the estimated change in the revenue generated and the associated mills. And then finally, we have to show the estimated annual impact on a home with an assessed market value of $100,000 and $200,000. So that is what the schedule shows. Further, for the building reserve levies, if a district lists those, then we need to kind of describe what the intended purpose of those funds are. And they're preliminary. We will have changes once we have final budgets, but this is the schedule that I would put in the newspaper before my. I just need to approve it.
do have a question. I've heard of the tuition and,
The flexibility fund has been around for, several years actually, and it originated when, the legislature, actually, gave money, state funds, to all the school districts one time, it was back in 2003, I believe. And along with that came the ability to, have a levy in the flexibility fund. But it was based on future distributions of state money, and they never made any. So that sat dormant for a while, but the purpose of that fund, and you look it up in the law, it sounds like you can spend it on anything, but really there's a list of certain things you can spend out of there, such as, and I think that's where innovative programs come in. There were, energy costs that were of a concern, so the district had extra energy costs and they wanted to do that. Teacher recruitment and retention, some facility items, I think curriculum is in. They haven't really changed the purposes in there so much. So that's how it started, so it's been a fund that's been in there for a long time. Now we can levy in the flexibility fund an amount equal to what we receive in state learning aid money. And, you know, our district got approved for that in 2024. So that is what you're seeing here on the schedule is what we would match in what the state gives us so that we can support our program, and we apply for that state money. A while allows us to have a
Any other questions? Clarifying questions? Lloyd?
Is non-voted levy synonymous with permissive?
yes, those are state things.
Thank you, that's it.
Good question. Anything else? Jennifer?
So we're gonna put out this intent to impose a non-voted levy, but then we're also gonna run a levy?
Correct. Because the levy election that we're having is for something that requires voter approval. This is something the legislature came up with in 2017 as a way to just, require school districts to provide a little bit more information about their planning for their budget.
Any other questions?
Just another way to kind of think about that too, Jennifer, is, these represent different checkbooks that the district has, and you can only use the transportation checkbook for transportation stuff. The voted levy that we're looking at for the elementary, is called general fund, and so that can be used for salaries, benefits, supplies, textbooks, that kind of stuff, but we couldn't buy textbooks with transportation dollars. So it's just another way to kind of think about those as being categorized in very specific funds with, limited, uses.
I know sometimes, when we're dealing with like a year at a time, that there are permissive levies that have stopped happening. And I know like last year, that's why when we asked for the levy, it could have been. So are there things that aren't being shown on here where the actual amount would not look like that, or is this what the actual amount?
The only actual amounts you see on here are in the, where it says 2022, 2023 actual levy, because that's based on the budgets you've adopted this year, and so those are set. The 2023-24 amounts are all projections, they're just estimates. The reason they're not more precise is because we won't have taxable values until August 1st. We don't get those from the Department of Revenue until then, and so the mills will change
likely because, that's what is involved in a mill levy or a mill calculation is taxable value. And then the tax levy amount needed, as I mentioned before, is I have to close the books for the fiscal year to see what we have for funding these funds going into the next year. So part of it is actual, but that all that you see on the right is all pure estimate. But it's an educated guess anyway.
But because we know, just from what we can see with our eyes, that the taxable value, well, I guess maybe not as much for the elementary, for all of Fayette County is going up. Shared amounts per household theoretically would be less than that. Correct?
Yes, as taxable value goes up, then the amount per household would likely go down because the estimated mills needed to raise that money would go down.
Can I add just one more clarifying thing? On the estimated annual tax impact on we have to list $100,000 or a $200,000 home. That is not the market value of a home. That is the assessed value of the home. And Denise got from the Montana Department of Revenue this week the median assessed value of a home in the Flathead High School District is $263,370. So when you look at that 200,000, the median, the one in the middle, would be a little bit more than that. But that was just some information that we found as we were looking at our levies, because we had talked about listing out, what would the cost be on a $100,000 assessed value up to $600,000 assessed value. There are very few homes in the Flathead High School District that have an assessed value of $600,000. That would be a multi-million-dollar home. Just thought I'd share that little tidbit.
I would have to add too that when I received that email from the Department of Revenue, they did say that they're in the middle of, reappraisal. So that number could change, but they won't know until June or July. But for now, their best information for me was that 200. Other questions? Is there a motion?
I'd move to approve the notice.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ursula. Is there any public comment?
Again, I'm Sean Pandia with Kalispell, and the privilege of living in Kalispell, I pay over half of my taxes goes to this school district, high school and elementary. So Ursula had a good point, that on the values going up, and they are in the process of reevaluating home values, and I mean, it's pretty obvious they're gonna go up. Like, that's just what happens in our valley. Everybody's moving in from out of town, all these values went up, and the value of my house doubled, what I could get for it from when I bought it back in 2013. So I think it's pretty safe to say you're already going to get an increase. I also really don't see how this is gonna help you pass the general funds levy. If that's really important to you, when this hits the newspaper and word gets around, I mean, you saw how fast it got around with Micah's resignation before you even had a chance to discuss it here. So I don't think it's gonna help you to pass this ahead of that. And then also, I find it pretty interesting that this flexibility fund sounds like something that hasn't been used in a long time, but was dug out to be able to get the school some more money that's matched by the state. I mean, I guess, good digging. I don't really like my idea of my taxes going up, and I hope that you don't vote for this. I hope, like I've said before, that you will find what can be cut and be more, fiscally conservative with the money you already have to use, instead of continuing to ask for more and more. I know COVID created this cliff for you all, which Jack pointed out in the finance committee meeting back when you were spending extra dollars. Shouldn't have been spending extra dollars on things that were going forward into the future, because now you're having to take it out of the taxpayers, and it's gonna be really hard to pass.
30 seconds.
In my opinion, if you do this ahead of time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Deliberations from the board? This is elementary trustees. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Notice of intent to impose non-voted levies, high school.
Okay, this is a pay schedule only for the high school funds, that are involved, same comparison. I would note that, the high school taxable value, is much larger than the elementary because of all the feeder districts, that come, the students that come to our high school. So you kind of see the no amount of less. Just one point about taxable value I'd like to make is that reappraisal raises taxable value, but so does new construction. So I anticipate any increases that we see in taxable value, both at the elementary and the high school, would be, a combination of both of them. Got a lot of building going on around here too. So at any rate, basically the same funds, same comparisons. So I just would like to be able to publish this information in the newspaper. We're required by state statute to publish it by March 31st.
Serious chair, bro.
Oh.
Not her fault. Definitely not your fault.
Denise, why is the flex fund different? This one.
Why is the flex fund different on this one? Before I got here, the district applied for and received approval for a transformational learning aid from the state. It was effective for fiscal year 2024, so that's next year. I believe we were approved for $755,000 or so. What has happened is the state, I'm not sure how they fund it, but it's at their level, but apparently they didn't receive the funds that they were approved for to distribute fully fund the amounts that they approved.
Yeah, mostly correct. The state set a certain appropriation for distribution of the transformational learning aid. And we, when we applied for that grant, it was a lottery. First, you had to complete the grant and be accepted and approved there. And then they put you into a lottery system. And Kalispell Public Schools 2 years ago was 8th and 9th drawn, right? That was our lotto number. And so we've moved into the queue. And so for this next fiscal year, the state has said, here's how much funding we have available until one of those schools above you drops out of their 4-year funding cycle. So until someone else moves out and paves the way for additional funding, we only got one district, the elementary district, fully funded. That's where that 414,000, and on the high school, the only remaining money is 41,000. So that's what that difference was, in the two flex funds.
So this levy would be the match to the district.
Thanks, Denise. Other questions?
So perhaps I'm misremembering, but I feel like I remember that in permissive levies, there's a maximum amount you're allowed to ask for the district, and we usually stay well below that. Are we still well below maxing out our permissive levy asks?
Depends on the fund, you know, for example, in the flexibility fund, we can't levy any more than the amount that we're receiving in state aid. In the best appreciation fund, we're limited to how much we can levy for the replacement of those buses. So, in terms of those limits where they apply in each of these funds, we're levying the maximum amount.
Oh, we are.
It-
Because usually in transportation, we're well below our maximum, are we not anymore?
I think that when you refer to maximum, I think you're thinking of general fund and not transportation. There's no maximum on transportation. Your maximum, I mean, you figure out what your expenditure needs are for transportation, and then you figure out what you're gonna get in state and county reimbursement, and then the rest is supported by either interest earnings or maybe charges for bus services, any other income, and then the local levy too. So,
Sorry, it was my misremembering.
yeah, that's okay. And I would say in building reserve, we're limited there. There is a limit, I'm sorry, in the building reserve fund, because that is made up completely of that state major maintenance aid that they have. There's a set formula for that, and that's what this means. Because we levy enough to maximize what the state is giving us in the building reserve fund. So to levy less would mean we're leaving state money on the table. We actually need everything we can get.
Other questions? Somebody want to make a motion? Jack?
I move to approve the high school intent to impose the non-voted levies as presented.
Thank you, Jack. Is there a second? Thank you, Will. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment?
I feel the same way about this one. It's just not a good idea to put it out before you do the, vote. Which says to me, you probably don't have high hopes for that going through. So, again, it was just additional money that the school didn't have to waste spending for the firm and all the promotion you're gonna be doing for, trying to pass that levy. We're just gonna take it right here anyway. I do understand the, gotta match the funds to get the funds, but just look at ways to budget better. What you need to do, not raise our taxes. We've already paid more than half of our property taxes going to the school. And most of the people don't even have kids in the school. I take my kids to a different school. I want them to be in this school. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other deliberations from the board? Okay, this is for all trustees. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Next up, consent agenda district-wide. Any questions from the board? Thank you, Lance. Is there a second? This is district-wide, so Will, thank you. Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, any deliberation?
My one thing on the rental agreement with the house, I was trying to remember, is the rent going? Like, are we charging more rent for the house? Everybody else's rent is going up, we're keeping it?
Yeah.
Okay. My comment is that it might be slightly under market value for what we are charging for rent for the house.
And one thing we did bring up at the finance committee is it time to think about selling that property? I know, and that looks like that plan is changed considerably, yeah. So perhaps, you know, do we want to be landlords? Probably not, but that is, you know, a different discussion.
Be superintendent housing for our, to make our search more attractive.
Right?
I said our new superintendent could live there.
I know.
What I said.
$1,500 a month, that's
I'm
great.
sure he would love living across the street from Platte High School.
Yeah.
Or she.
This house would never get eggs.
No students would ever bother them.
No.
Yeah. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda district-wide. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Next up, curriculum instruction and assessments is our work study topic for tonight. So, Pete, Matt, and Sarah. We could take a 3-minute break.
We'll take what we get. Right, the money being set, maybe we should, I don't know. Decision made, put it away. Because I was totally. You're railroaded. I'm like.
This is the moment everybody stuck around for, so thanks for sticking around for the show. So, obviously our work session, curriculum instruction and assessment, tonight. And so what we've tried to do is just dig a little bit into, what basically, revolves around our strategic plan. So everything that you're gonna hear tonight is gonna revolve around our strategic plan. And, a part of what you have asked us to do is moving from a traditional educational system to a personalized competency-based education, and that's embedded right in our strategic plan. As we call it, it all falls under transformational, so just giving you that big overview, transformational learning, that's where the grant falls under. And then as we start drilling down, the personalized competency-based education. And so one of the things we're gonna look at is, you know, how do we support and inspire our KPF students and educators to celebrate what they're already doing that's great? And so we do great things here. We don't ever want to lose sight of that because of what we do. And I've been a part of this district a long time, and you can see the progression. But hey, can we make some shifts? Can we do some things different and be able to move us forward a little bit? And that's really what we've been doing in phase one. We know we'll be headed in the right direction when all of our stakeholders have a good understanding of what personalized competency-based education is. And so that's a little bit front-loading you, and Matt's going to talk about the strategic plan.
So this slide's in there to remind us that it actually hits all of our goals in the strategic plan, but most specifically these two. And this is a visual. I agreed to 1 minute per slide, by the way, and then I'm following Pete, so I feel like I need to yield time to Pete. I don't want to rush, but this is a complex slide, it's gonna take more than a minute, but we'll get back. So we've been using this visual to help roll out the different parts of what personalized competency-based education is. And so you'll see that the personalized competency-based education is the main road. It's the main thing that we're driving at. Above the road, you're gonna see some of the common things that would be equity-based, that would be in every different classroom, regardless of the grade levels. And these are just checks for us to make sure that
in personalized competency-based education as new, shiny, silver bullet, it's gonna fix everything. What it's more about is putting all the pieces together and combining the best practices, best research over the last 20 years in education, and making sure they're working together. And those things are like Hattie's high-impact instructional strategy, so this is from a mega-analysis of what works in education, putting those instructional practices into play. Systems of support, we know that works, it's data-driven. Inclusive, equitable, family, community engagement, essential standards. And then along the road, you see the grade, that's supposed to represent some guardrails, and those guardrails are just universal things in our profession that keep the conversation going. So we've talked a lot about it in the curriculum committee, but it's those 4 essential questions that guide education. What is, and the first one is the most important, what is it that we expect students to know and be able to do? How do we know what they know? And so how are we assessing? And then what do we do when they don't get it? And then what do we do for the kids that already have it when they walk into our classroom? So if we can answer those 4 essential questions as educators, we know we're on the right track. So those are the guardrails represent. Below the road is just some possible things that we can use to onboard our staff into this type of environment. And so extended classroom experiences. We've started that this year in K-8, and it's taken off, and it's been so exciting to see. And what we're doing is we're saying, here are the most essential, learnings or learning objectives in this grade, in this content area. And can we attach a community embedded experience that's real, that kids can get their hands dirty and learn about? And because we know that makes that learning experience much deeper and resonates forever with those students. So if we're first identifying the most important things to be teaching, and then 2, connecting that to something physical and in real life for students is super powerful. The same concept applies to project-based experiences, but it doesn't have to be community attached. This is more project-based inside of a classroom. And then what we're seeing a lot in the middle school and high school is more of that career exploration, work-based experiences. There's a really good article in the Beacon, if you didn't read it, about how we've been able to add those. My favorite quote was from Mike Kelly, and he said, "This isn't hard to sell." And I think sometimes we overthink. Some of these things should just be commonplace, and of course that makes sense because kids are making real connections. And the last box is probably our biggest achievement so far, is just recognizing that we're trying to put space into things that we don't know yet. And so this process is messy, and we're learning a lot as we go, and we want to create space for the good ideas we haven't had yet. This is the slide just represents a growth mindset, and it's not numbered off like you go from 1 to 6, but it's just things that we talk about when we celebrate a growth mindset. And most importantly, we celebrate what's right already, and then we build off our successes. And this visual is a representation that, districts do this a couple different ways. And we've been recently able to observe districts that are doing it 2 different ways. And the first district, I'd say, is a district in Colorado that's well-known across the country for having one of the best aligned systems. And so it's hard to argue with their success and how they've done business. And you can walk into their board meetings, you can walk into their curriculum meetings, and their district office will have the most aligned curricular documents that you've ever seen. I mean, it's, for a curriculum nerd like myself, it's really impressive, and you can have a lot of fun looking at those things. But when you walk into classrooms, the teachers aren't fully implementing, so it's being organized, definitely vetted out many times in a central office, and then they're trying to implement it down into the classrooms. Versus other districts that we've been able to observe, it's a little messier at the top because they're trying to keep up with what the teachers are actually doing on the ground. And what they're doing is they're getting ideas together, and they're saying, these are the best practices that are going on in the nation. And then what does it look like in this town, in this school, with our teachers, and where are the launch points for our teachers? What gets our teachers the most excited? And then how can we grow it based on their excitement? And then the central office is trying to keep up.
But what you see in those classrooms is you see everything that they have in the central office is being, and actually more, is actually being taught in the classroom. So we are subscribing to this bottom-up innovation, and then top-down support. And I think that that's, our teachers are close to the problem. We want to outline this work, and then we want to grow from the bottom up.
Sarah on this yet. Or Sarah did a lot of work with the slides and putting everything together, so thanks, Sarah, on that. And, we talked a little bit about, defining traditional curriculum assessment and instruction, within transformational learning. And I think Matt really helped bringing a clarity to this for me. What he said is when we look at personalized competency-based education, he said the personalized is the instruction and the competencies is the curriculum. And I know you guys have heard me talk about this, before, but one of probably the best examples, that I can use is, one of the things that, Jody's been working on, Brock Anderson out at the student-built house, we have construction math, but we also have a student-built house. So how do we give a math credit for being able to apply those skills to those students? So one, they're getting a CTE credit with the house building class, but yet at the same time, they're also getting a math credit. So that's where those competencies come in. So how do we know that they have completed those competencies in order to earn a credit? Otherwise, we're just saying, hey, you just took this class, and yeah, it's implied within there that you're gonna get some geometry, some algebra, maybe some trig, some different things like that. That's where we really go in and drill down and develop those competencies so that we know that students are proficient. And again, it goes back to personalized. That's not for everybody. And so we allow a lot of different avenues. And you go back to, that slide that Matt showed at the beginning and the different on-ramps, to be able to get there. And allowing our students more choice and more voice in what they do. And one thing I just really want to drive, it's not going to be for everybody. Some need to stay in, some of those traditional lanes because they need that structure. They're not ready for it. And so we're trying to work with that, within the structure that we have, but that's all part of personalized. And then we talk about our guardrails all the time. Hey, what do we want students to be able to know and do, and then how will we know when they've learned it? And then we put that at the top of our 6-lane highway and our guardrails. And then what do we do, or how do we respond when they don't learn it? So what are some of those interventions that we need to do with our students? And then what do we do when they already know it? And so we're going through, so I think you saw some of the new classes coming through. One that comes to mind is at Glacier High School. It's Anthony Lapke, independent learning pathway. So a student comes into his math class. Well, let's meet you where the student is at. And, they may be coming into an algebra class. For some of us, it might take us all year to finish that algebra class, but for some, hey, I can move through this material. I can move through it at a little bit different pace, and I might finish my algebra, by December. I might get that semester. Then do I move on, to the next semester, or are there some things embedded within that I can have other experience or other enrichment activities? So, but these are the guardrails that drive us, and we really try to drive that home every time we talk about personalized competency-based education. Ready?
Thank you. I did speak a lot tonight, so I may take less than a minute on each slide. So we just wanted to give some examples. We kind of gave zoomed out big picture, but to zoom in, thinking about what some of those shifts are going to look like to build off of what's going well and make it even better. So the first is just an example of teaching to the curriculum. And so there's a picture here of Wonders. This is the K-5 curriculum that's used for ELA in most of our schools. Shifting from following that packaged curriculum to using the curriculum as a tool in our toolbox to teach to the students. So instead of every kid gets Wonders every day, the same lesson, when some kids need something totally different because maybe they're reading a grade level behind, or maybe they're reading 2 grade levels ahead. So instead of teaching to the curriculum, it's teaching those standards. And this is just an example of some work our K-5 teachers have already started embarking on, which is taking all these standards by grade level and really trying to drill down to the essential or priority standards so that we can go depth over breadth with the work we do with our kids. This falls under essential question 1. What do we expect our students to be able to learn? This is still essential question number 1, but it's this idea of shifting from learning must take place in the 4 walls of the classroom to learning can take place in a lot of different places. And so this first example is Mrs. Holden at Russell's fourth grade class. The kids are playing cribbage, and I looked at some of Chow Young's photos of these experiences, and I didn't know anything other than they were playing cribbage at Buffalo Hills. And I looked at the fourth grade math standards, I'm like, well, we're hitting a key standard immediately. They need to be able to fluently add, subtract, multi-digit whole numbers to be able to play crib. Does anyone play crib? Raise your hand. Right? You need to be able to be quick and add and subtract quickly and figure out how to pick points. And the other skill they were utilizing is social awareness. They're using strategies to work with people who are different than them. You know, this demographic that they may not have in their world, and they're benefiting one another socially. And so this is what makes it a competency. We're taking this academic knowledge and this whole child skill, and we're putting it together in a real life experience for kids. The other just demonstrates voice and choice. We've got FHS Junior working towards acquiring his private pilot's license while in an internship. How awesome is that? These are the things that, if I were to ask you, like, what was the most exciting thing that you remember about your school experience? It's often stuff like this, where you're out in the community, you're not just sitting in the classroom doing whole group instruction. The next piece, that essential question number 2, how will we know if they learned it? So that assessment piece of curriculum instruction and assessment. And so it's really shifting towards a vertically aligned, meaning K-12, we're all kind of doing something similar, balanced assessment system. So the idea of balanced assessment is there's not just one tool we use. I'm using something where I might be comparing kids to other students across the nation, and I'm using assessments that compare students to how they're achieving on the standards. So different types of assessments as a check and balance. So here's just an example. This is AimsWeb, a tool that we use K-8. It's a screener, the temperature check, and it shows growth. What we're moving towards or shifting towards is common assessments. The cool thing is at a 9-12 level, they've already been collaborating in common assessments for years. This is an example of a history rubric, a performance task, where ELA standards or English standards are embedded as well as history standards, and they fine-tuned it over the years. The goal would be, hey, instead of doing a common assessment once a year, which is more summative, like, what if we built this in for standards and we were able to make shifts quickly and in real time? So I'm excited about the work. I'm excited to build off the success we already have with some of this common assessment, some of the common assessments. Essential questions 3 and 4, it really gets into, like, what are the interventions for kids who need more? And you'll hear a lot about this. What do we do for our kids who are gifted and who need extension and who have already captured the content 10 minutes ago? They're still sitting in the classroom. What do we do for those students? This really all falls under systems of support. The shift is really towards making it more personalized, making it like what I need. What do I need during this time period, whether I'm not achieving the standard or I've already exceeded it? So right now, we have done awesome things with systems of support. We've grown to be more inclusive. We've grown to be core plus more. But still at a tier 2, tier 3 level, it's mostly pull-out, and the schedule is kind of stagnant. We want to shift towards consistent implementation. So not just pockets in certain buildings, but consistent implementation with fluid and flexible scheduling. So as kids get the skill, they can move on. They're not stuck in a group or stuck in a class for a semester. And then just being as inclusive as possible, so that kids aren't being isolated or segregated to get certain needs met.
Mike, if you go one slide. This slide is probably the most exciting for us that have been working on this, and it ties into a lot of discussions that we've been having at the calendar committee. And when you look at the bottom right, that's really a shift in thinking and how we facilitate a classroom. So if you're in a traditional classroom, one of the things you're going to see is a lot of whole group instruction. I'm trying to make this practical, right? So this is whole group instruction. If we were trying to model this, what we do is give a pre-assessment. We walk in see what everybody knows about transformational learning, competency-based education, and then we group you according to skill. And if we had some learning outcomes, we'd say, by the end of tonight, this is what we want you to be able to do and know. And then some of you would already know half of that information. everybody on the calendar committee would probably know 3/4 of this information. I mean, on the curriculum committee and the calendar committee probably too, Heather. And then we work with you just to accelerate your path. That's not how traditional school works. Traditional school works where you kind of lecture to the middle, and then we have all of these supports that catch the students that are falling behind. And then we're constantly chasing that group of kids that are falling behind. Where it's just so much more empowering for students when we can check off the things that they already know, and then we can quickly accelerate them through the things that they don't know, and then they're done, right? And so when they're done, that doesn't mean they're done with school and they graduate early. It just means they're done and they move on to the next thing, or they move on to the next opportunity. So in the calendar committee discussion, it turns into, what if we create a semester track that looks different, that's an accelerated track for students? And if they get it done in 75 days, they're done with it, and then they can take a J term, something different, right? Pete'll talk more about that, so I won't steal his thunder on that. But it's really exciting, and it's made possible because of the mind shift change in how you're looking at a group of students and what you're able to provide in that equitable way to all students in the room, not that equity-based traditional system of we're only providing equity backwards. Right, well, right, now this is actually my slide. So we're starting with, you know, when we work with staff, we're talking about why would we do this model, right? And it's pretty easy to get there. You do some profile graduate activities, you do some kind of dream big type activities, and it's easy to get excited about. This is why people got into education, is we want to provide for all of the needs of unique students in our classrooms. And then it gets a little bit more complicated. It's like, well, this how and what can be switched around, but it's like, well, what is it? And it's like, well, I'm doing some of it already. Is it a little this, is it a little that? Yeah, it's about more pulling it together. But it gets complicated around the how. Like, how do you make the shift? And at a high school level, do you need a cohort of teachers if you're going to shift the schedule so that you can schedule around a different model? In an elementary school, do you need a grade level band of teachers to get together so that you're collaborating and sharing resources? And so that how gets a little bit more complicated. And what we're doing right now, can you click that yellow link? And if you go up to the top right KPS TL series here, see the pointer. Perfect. So we're working with every principal in the district, and we're working through 6 sessions. And those sessions are represented here. We have one tomorrow. We're in session 3 tomorrow. We're in session 3 tomorrow. These are about 3-hour meetings. And what we're doing is we're grounding all of our admin team in common language. So when we talk about proficiency skills, we're all talking about the same thing. And then at the end of each one of these sessions, we're leaving documents or activities for our principals so that when they turn over and start teaching their staff and working through this, that they don't have to recreate the wheel, that they're going through and there's a learning progression for their staff. You can go back to that original slide. And then as a group, we're identifying the key indicators of what it means to be personalized competency-based education. So what are the hallmarks if you walked into a classroom and you'd be able to say, this class has shifted from a traditional classroom to a personalized competency-based education model? What are those key indicators? So you would see voice and choice for students. You would see a well-defined curriculum. Students would be able to articulate what it is they're expected to know and be able to do. And then the biggest one is you see student agency. So you see students knowing what is expected of them, and then students creating the pathway to make that thing happen and working with the teacher as a facilitator instead of the student just being the recipient of the education. So there's nothing more common in a traditional school system to walk into a classroom and the hardest working person in the room is the teacher. And the kids are like, entertain me, let's do this all day, right? Where when it's about you now, right? And it's about you have to actually check off for competency. Time matters least. So sitting in the seat doesn't get you checked off in competency. Learning matters most. So now your agency as a learner is up. And I think that's what we're hearing from staff is we want kids more engaged, we want kids taking ownership of their learning. We're tired of pulling them along, and so that's what we see. But we're still
those are the main ones, and then we're gonna leave a lot of space for our educators to identify those other key indicators and pick the ones they wanna grow from, and then that's where we support and grow from. Actually, Micah, can you go back 3 slides? So that way I can pull a map, and then I can use my minute from that slide to the next slide, to the next slide on there. So one of the things, and Matt alluded to this, is, you know, trying to take a look at, you know, how do we do things a little bit different as we move on from, you know, seat time to basically to competencies, and Matt talked about this a little bit. As a school board, you know, you approved the skeleton calendar for 24-25. And we do, we have a starting date and basically an end date. And so what we've been meeting as a calendar committee is, you know, are there things that we can do differently, you know, within that calendar? And we talked about this. So, traditionally, a semester is 90 days. If we went to a calendar that looked like this, you know, it'd be 77 days. Well, how do students move through, a calendar in 77 days when we always had to do it in 90 days? And that's where, you know, some of the work that Matt and Sarah were talking about, that's going back to priority standards. That's coming up with competencies in a student to, you know, to be able to move through that. And then, you know, then maybe using Anthony Lapke's, algebra class. So maybe that student moves through, maybe he's done in December. And I've earned my half a credit. Now maybe during a J term, as Matt, talked about in January, that 3 weeks, maybe they could go to the college and take a different class, take a running start class, take a concurrent enrollment class, or maybe they could do enrichment activities, or maybe they could go skiing for 3 weeks. Obviously, that's where you gotta get parent buy-in, because it is choice and voice, you know, for the student, but it's also, I firmly believe that the parent is the primary responsibility for educating their child. And then taking a look at the second semester, you know, we've talked about this, another 72 days, another intern session at the end. And, you know, looking at this, as we've talked about it on the calendar committee, is you could build this schedule within the traditional schedule. You know, we're not gonna have probably everybody that's gonna buy into this. Nope, this will not work in my class. I mean, we heard that a lot at the calendar committee. You know, IB students or AP students, you know, hey, we're tied into, you know, these learner profiles, we're tied into these standards, and this is how we have to move through. So it might not work for everybody, but for an IB or an AP student, what happens when they get to May, they've taken the test? Do we make them sit there for another 3 weeks doing something else, or do they have an opportunity to take that intern session at the end to do something a little bit different? So we're just, once again, trying to build more choice and more voice, you know, for our students and basically for our staff members. And how we want to look at this is, you know, do we, once we get rolling and also get the personalized competency-based education in place, you know, do we have staff that would be interested in doing this and putting a cohort together and then, you know, recruiting students for it? So it's pretty exciting. We have a lot of work to do, but, we're really, you know, exploring it. And who knows, it might look something different. You can go to the next slide, Mike, because, you know, we've been doing a lot of visits. We talk about the why, thanks, Mike.
I'll use this, Mike. I guarantee you, as trustees, as I have learned, as the superintendent and as our amazing staff have learned, there is going to be pushback. There are going to be people like, whoa, you rocked my world. I have been doing this for 25 years. I come into my room, I shut my door, I teach the same thing every year. They've got to be in their seats. How can you let them do this to us? You are going to hear that. We have heard it. We've seen it in our staff surveys. We are not looking for obstacles in this, and we have taken the direction that we developed with the strategic plan, going back to that document, and it's broad. We're not saying that every single thing has to happen in a cookie cutter format, but I guarantee you there is a parallel education system being developed by the state legislature. It's called charter schools. Depending on which one gets passed, you're going to have the first right of refusal. If someone comes to you and says, I want a charter school where we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how we're going to do it, and I'm not bound by 90 days in a class, I'm not bound by seat time, I'm not bound by all this other extraneous stuff, you have to either accept that, or you have to implement it yourself in a district. And so there are going to be people on the outside looking in. And so I know I'm on my way out as superintendent here, but I'm going to urge you and caution you to to listen, take input, but also understand that this is the direction that we are headed as a district. And it's moving forward. And we said, it's not gonna be easy. I've never said that from day one. We put a 5-6 year timeline on this, talking about calendar 2 years before we would actually implement something. Talking with our teachers and our staff about what would you like to see in your building, and what would make you an effective teacher, and what would bring you joy when you come into this building every day. So I just wanted to add a little bit to that, because we certainly heard it, and we've heard it from administrators, we've heard it from teachers. Teachers are talking with their administrators, and saying, gosh, it comes back to that how. We are figuring it out, and we will. We're creative, we're solution oriented. This is really good for kids, and it's gonna be good for staff too.
Which minute was that?
Like that.
Who gets 1 minute left to talk now?
So I always said I was a man of few words. So, just taking a look at the, last slide. So, ongoing professional learning. Matt said, hey, we're going through our professional learning series, with the entire K-12 admin. We've also been doing, school visits. And so we just wanted to share a little bit, of some of the things that we've seen. We've been to Westminster, in Colorado. We've been to, probably about 12 different schools in South Carolina. There's some other, schools out there that really are doing this well. Kettle Moraine, is a model school. I know Jen Stein has been here pretty much all night, so we want to bring her up so you can talk a little bit about her experience, too. But I just kind of want to highlight some of the things. As we went last week to South Carolina and visited elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Some of the things that I just highlighted that I heard from the administration that went there, and this is what we're really trying to accomplish, is students took ownership for learning and knew their learning targets. All kids got the big picture. They understood what was expected. They see their year-long pathway goal. There was a lot of celebrating growth. Transparency with their expectations. It included both academics and behaviors. A lot of small group learning. The data notebooks, kids taking ownership in their learning. So, that was one of the common themes, was transparency and then students taking ownership. Part of their competency is being able to self-check, reflect, and know the next steps. And then Matt also said this is what we heard. It was, teachers, if you're working harder than your students, then we need to make a shift. And then, one of the last things was, there's a lot of guaranteed experiences for our students looking within. We do a lot of these things here at KPS. We just need to be more efficient. Jen, do you want to talk a little bit now that I put you on the spot?
Yeah. I'll be quick.
You get a minute.
I'm Jen, if I haven't met you, I work at Edgerton, and I have no lack of enthusiasm for anything, so I'm on the really excited side, so I've tried to talk myself into being calm and collected. But I would say the things that I've heard, as a principal, part of your job is really to support your staff, a happy staff, a staff that doesn't turn over, a staff that is laughing, and that was something I saw in South Carolina. Teacher said, it was hard at first, but it's actually so much more fun, and it's actually easier for us to collaborate together. So that was a really big deal for me, to know that I'm not about to put my staff through something that's not worth it, and not gonna bring joy. And then watching kids is amazing. At Edgerton, they've asked me questions about, like, what did you see? And what I saw was a structure that doesn't look that different from what's happening at Edgerton, for example, but what's intentionally being done in those small things that we can tweak that will make all the difference. And so I think that makes us feel better that there's not this mountain to climb that we can't reach. It looks well within reach, and the staff is super excited. And I don't know, our admin team's excited, and we get to dream big and enjoy our jobs and watch kids. I mean, they can do some amazing things. I don't think we always give them credit for, so this is their chance. That's less than.
Jen, you get all the questions.
This sounds very similar to what LEC's doing. They explain differently.
think, more of our schools should look like the LEC and the VOAG.
Yeah.
I think, you know, out of necessity, those schools have had to meet students where they are, and students, sometimes don't demonstrate compliance. And so when a kid does not demonstrate compliance, we have to figure out what to do with them, right? And we're good at solving problems when the problem's pretty obvious. I think a lot of traditional school systems are based on this compliance model. And if you're a kid and you sit in a room and you can be talked to, and, you know, you're nice enough and you turn work in on time, it becomes more about that, and it becomes a little less about the competencies. And then we wonder sometimes why we have a high dropout rate in college, or unsuccessful sophomore year, or whatever. And we just haven't been measuring competency. But those places where you're at the VOAG and it's pretty clear what you need to know and be able to do, and you're out there physically doing a lot of the work while you're learning it, is just an excellent model. And then the LEC, where they've really done a nice job of defining what they want students to progress through. And Jody would be the first to tell you, they have progress to make as well about, you know, some mindset shifts there. But, you know, those kids know what they're supposed to be doing, and they have a plan.
Well, and I can see that in the ownership part of it from the student's point of view. So with LEC, there's a lot of individualized, computer work there, and then there's a lot of, infrastructure needed at the VOAG in order to accomplish those there. How do you see the future of high school buildings or elementary buildings, and what kind of infrastructure is going to need to be changed in those to accommodate the more individualized learning?
I mean, one thing that I really see with it is more flex space, you know, and that obviously we're going through the long-range facility plan, you know, hey, it's the end goal to, you know, pass it on and to build something else, but what I'm really interested in is looking at the space that we currently have and how do we better utilize it. And, you know, one of the things, you know, that we've been seeing in a personalized competency-based education is more flexibility, more grouping, you know, with students. And I think that we have the infrastructure right now to be able to do a lot of that.
I would also, just to piggyback on that, I think what we're doing with our K-8 student extension activities is actually taking advantage of the community resources that we have. And that's a first step, is we have a lot of things available to us in the community. We just need to tap into, organize, coordinate, being at those spaces. And those people are very willing and wanting us to be there. And then what Pete's been doing with Mike Kelly on the high school side of those internships, those are people that want our students, and they're learning a really valuable skills. I would also say that we've looked at how schedules, not only in calendar, but how a building schedule can be flexible, and we can maximize our current space before we have to go to voters and ask for new space. And we probably have some room there. Even at the elementary level, we've talked about different start times and different end times, and we're a ways from this, just fair warning. But, you know, to give families more choice in when they start school and when they end school, could be better for families and save us on, you know, getting wound up about choice. But I think if we do get to a spot where we need space, and that's probably coming, I would hate to see us fall down this traditional path of just building another traditional high school or traditional elementary school that just looks the same with these little square rooms, and just be a little bit more creative on how we can share spaces.
And also, you know, partner, you know, with the community, you know, Matt talked about, you know, work-based learning and some of the different things within our community, internships, apprenticeships, and different things like that. But it's also looking at, you know, how do we partner with the college? You know, instead of duplicating services, it's can we start combining some of our resources to look at this a little bit differently? You know, that will have a bigger impact on our students and on our community. First, I stole my own mic because I didn't want to share.
Well, that's right. When I use the term infrastructure, I'm using it in a very generic way and not referring to the physical structure, but the tools necessary to accommodate the individualized learning. And I don't know what all those tools will encompass and how they're going to change with technology, but I didn't know what kind of ideas the other schools have, were working with.
I would also say, you know, there's a comment earlier about the print shop and kind of more screen time. I also don't think that this means more screen time for students. there's a lot of, programs that allow, leveling and next level of work for students that are really great programs, but that can't be the school day, right, for a kid. We don't want to put a kid on a math program, even if that math program is perfectly, artificially intelligence driven, where it's the next step of learning all the time. That's just not a good way to do that. So how we see that being used in schools that are, implementing this model in year 5 and year 10, is that's a part of the kid's math experience, but they're still getting, that small group work with their peers, they're still solving real life problems, they're still working with manipulatives with their hands. It's not just computer driven.
South Carolina was like, oh, we don't have to buy a big fancy anything, we just have to look at what we're doing and make some adjustments, but I never saw anything that would cost us money that I'm not already using. It would just be how am I using it and using it better.
My comment is, this is based on our strategic plan where we spent a lot of time brainstorming. I know, Sean, you came to, a couple of our meetings when we were doing some brainstorming and talking about where to go. And, please don't leave trustees out of this, how we can support this, because, there is some pushback to it. And I think sometimes our role is to be a good sounding board for people who are wondering what's happening. This is great to see, what it is, so we can get it firm in our mind and can support what's being done. But again, it's based on our strategic plan and where, education is going, for our kids' future. This is student-centered. It's, flexibility. Teachers have a lot of flexibility in what they can do with this program, and it's based on student strength, what they need support with, and what their future is going to be like. So I share Jen's enthusiasm for this, and your enthusiasm, but make sure that we are giving you the support that you all need to do this. Not you though, Micah.
We have to remember, it's that 6-lane highway too. You've already seen, through some of the new course proposals and some of the things that people are proposing, some of what we call the low-hanging fruit, and some of those people are chomping at the bit, and then how do we support that? Then we have others, hey, I'm gonna sit back and let me see how this goes, or I really don't wanna be a part of it, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Some are in that slow lane and the fast lane, and I think Mikey does a really good job of outlining that, and it's gonna take a while to get there.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a few years, but, there's some of that low-hanging fruit that we can take advantage of.
The one thing I would say to that too is, when we first started talking about this and we were having listening sessions, with parents and we're talking, 5 years, 6 years, there were parents who were like, what? Why is it gonna take you so long? We should be doing this already, and my kid's gonna miss out because they're a sophomore in high school and you're gonna wait to do something to make a change for the benefit of my student. That's a hard one. That's a hard one to hear. But again, it is a change process. It's not a moment in time. And we're supportive of that, and we will work with our staff, administration, and we've been working with KEA leadership on, when things look like it might run up against a contract, what can we do? Can we develop some MOAs or MOUs around restructuring some of that? So I think there's a committed partnership with our community right now. We presented at Rotary and the Chamber and luncheons, and there's really strong support for the work that the school district is doing. And I think a big part of that is just the support that you've enabled us and given us to be able to move forward with this. So thank you.
Somebody had a,
I think all three of us did. I did, then she did, then
We'll
she
go
did.
down the
Oh, and
row.
then Jennifer too.
Okay, Ursula,
Mine was semi-answered, I'll just wait, we'll see if I can get some more answers from people.
Rebecca?
Actually, I'm really glad Jen spoke, because I was gonna start with my first question of how does this traditional model still exist? Are the reading groups at the elementary schools, are they playing cribbage in the room rather than at Buffalo Hill? It's an improvement definitely to go out of the room, but I'm glad that you see it more as a tweak, that we are doing a lot of this, that this isn't, we're starting from scratch. But I do have two concerns. I hope I'm not your negative person. I'll go with the easy one first. So I'm worried about credits. It's 22, on the high school level, it's 22 credits to graduate. We at the current moment offer 7 credits a semester and sometimes 8 with early birds. So that kind of means that you end up at junior year with 1 credit away from graduation, which to me feels like we're encouraging or supporting already early graduation and pushing kids harder and faster and not to actually sit and enjoy and learn. And I'm worried that this will accelerate that if we're offering more credits for their after-school jobs. But I'm worried that we're gonna see, and maybe it's a positive thing. Can you address the concern of how many credits to graduate? Are we pushing early graduation? And do we want to be pushing early graduation?
What? You take first.
I think we all want.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Fight me, boys.
That's a good question, it's really good.
Yeah, that is a good question, because like you said, you know, if you take 8 credits, you know, it's 22 credits at the high school level, and if you take 8 credits a year, you know, you can be done basically your junior year. But what we're really trying to do is to extend opportunities, you know, for students. Hey, if I'm able to move through this, and then just like we talked about with the, you know, the schedule, what are other opportunities that I can do? Can I get a credit at the college, you know, during that, intern session? Because maybe I want to go on and be an electrician, so I'm taking some math, I'm taking the house construction class, but now I'm also building towards maybe my AAS degree at Flathead Valley Community College. So I see it as basically as an extension. And yeah, if that student's ready to graduate early, and, you know, the parent signs off and they have a pathway, you know, I can't see us, you know, stopping them, but we want to make, you know, high school as rich as possible for our students and give them as many experiences, because, you know, a lot of us who get into education, you know, we really valued our education and we enjoyed it, and that's why we got into the business, is to be able to work with students. But some don't enjoy it, and they're ready to move on. So, you know, it can work both ways, right? I still think that that's a student and a parent, you know, decision, and being able to outline that pathway.
And I would say just through experience that we see that already, but where you see it manifested in, say, high school is kids taking 2 band classes or taking French and Spanish. Like they've suddenly got this room in their schedule, and the schedule has to align, right? Spanish can't interfere with orchestra or whatever it is. Like those are the constraints that we have. But I see it as just being, you know, further extending opportunities for kids to find and grow in what they love and want to do, and how do we support them in that. And it could be within the school, but it could also be out in the community, or like Pete said, you know, at the college or whatever. I think we're always gonna have those kids that want to be, you know, I'm done, right? I did my 3 years of high school. Get me out of here. I've got a job. I've got, you know, college plans. But we have the majority of our students take far more credits than they need to graduate. So I think that's encouraging and positive.
Different?
They said most of it. I would just add that, you know, I really like what you said about choice. And I think when you start opening up choices to students and parents, and that's what we're here to serve the community. They might make choices that we might not think are the best based on our experience, but I think we need to honor what the community is telling us and what they're choosing to do. But I would say that probably what we're gonna see is what other schools are saying is there's advantages to being a high school student and concurrently enrolled in college. There's a financial benefit, but there's also a social benefit where you can still be with your high school friends, but you're just doing different things that are benefiting your future, taking concurrent enrollment classes or taking different classes at high school that now you have the opportunity. But there's also just this reality that just because you go to a competency-based system doesn't mean kids are checking the box off and they're getting through school sooner. So if you can visualize a freshman coming into our high school right now, they can sign up for pre-algebra, Algebra 1, Geometry, or even Algebra 2. So they have 4 choices already. Just because they start in Algebra 2 even, doesn't mean that they just take 1 math class and they're done. They still have math requirements to fulfill, and then they move on, but they just happen to start at a high level. On the flip side is, we currently have, and I love that Mike's in the room, he's our English professor up there, but what do we do for all freshmen and under the current traditional model?
All freshmen take what?
English.
Ninth grade, English. We have 4 spots for a kid to start in math. We have 1 spot for a kid in English. And Mike is gonna say, well, we have an honor section, or we have an IB section.
No, I was just gonna say we're really important.
Yeah. But the concept is, we probably have a whole group of kids in that class that are varying levels, just like we have in math ability students. So even if they started in, let's say, English 2 or English 3, they probably would still be responsible for 4 years of English. It would just look different. Their 4th year would look different, just like their 3rd year of math would look different. There's that school that we were talking about in Colorado. Every student has to get through 12th grade ELA at a minimum. So they have kids coming in and they're testing in like a 7th grade ELA course. They just change their schedule so that that kid can get through 12th grade ELA, because they said, you're not leaving this high school with a high school diploma unless you have the competencies of 12th grade English. There are kids that walk in as sophomore or freshmen that are testing at a junior level. They're still getting them English courses, but obviously that minimum requirement has been successfully met, pretty early on.
It's nice. That was the easy question. It only got a 20-minute response. Matt rolls his eyes every time I bring this up, but I love school. I spent 23 years in school. And to me, the strength, but I like the good things of school. That idea of a lecture, I think, hasn't happened in 40 years, and it's a good thing. And I think we are, moving towards the seminars. And the strength of school is that you have other people interested in things that are best done in groups. Like, to me, the best classes of school, which we don't offer, by the way, is a dance class. Offer a circle, offer dance is something needing to be done in a group, better done in a group. So to me, the worry of this going into individual, going separate, is that I don't want to lose the seminar if you want English. I don't want to lose the excitement of the 6 kids sitting around who really want to talk about, is Lord of the Flies a positive thing that we want to do or a negative thing, or whatever it is that floats their boat that day. I'm really concerned about a school, and I'm not sure we're utilizing it as best now. I'm not sure that we don't have lots of time where kids are sitting in classroom doing their homework. And I'm like, well, they could be sitting at home. They could be sitting out at Glacier Park doing their homework. I want to make sure that we're utilizing the strength of the school, which is, to me, is other kids at the same space as you, with somebody who can lead you to do something cooler.
Sarah's gonna take this, I hope I've never actually rolled my eyes.
Oh, yeah, this is the 4th time I brought it up, and every single time you're like, yeah.
No, I have never done that.
All right, that's how I took it. How about that?
Sorry, I made you feel that way.
He gets things in his eyes sometimes.
I used to think he got things in his eyes too, but then I was like, I think you're gonna cry. Are you gonna cry? I'm about to cry too. So I think that is, a misunderstanding of personalized learning. Like, personalized learning is, I'm gonna give you what you need, but it doesn't take away all the other opportunities to do this. Like, we're in South Carolina that boasts itself as a state on personalized learning, and all we saw was student collaboration with other students. And so I would liken it to, students on individual education plans, right? On IEP, everything's about personalizing for that student. And they spend very little of their day alone, all in collaboration. So I don't think, when Jen mentioned earlier
Can I give
on,
an example? Like, so we're in a ELA class. She talked to the whole class for 8 minutes. She took an assessment about what they needed for their thesis that they were working on. And then these kids needed help with topic sentences. So she pulled the group back that they wrote, this is what I need help on. So the class is all doing the same thing, but advocating for what they need. So it looks, traditional. This is the opening. We talked about the book. And then everything was individualized, but it was like, I actually need help on, like, supporting details. And so she would pull a group back, and so a teacher is constantly with a group of kids, while other kids are working with kids that are in the same spot, but there was still whole group conversation. So like I said, it looks the same, but the things that were different were so incredibly intentional and made it so much more powerful that's what makes me excited. It's like the structure is there, and then the tweaking is gonna be what's super fun, but it doesn't lose that, because I would not be enthusiastic about a thing where everybody sits in a quiet room by themselves and never talks to each other.
the other idea is that it's
Yeah.
more inclusive. So So instead of lots of kids, so another example would be right now, our tier 2 intervention kids, the elementary level will get pulled out, and there's some stigma to, here I go, because I'm low in reading, to go be with the other kids who are low in reading. Everybody watches me exit. Instead of that, it's like, hey, the teacher's doing what Jen just said. They're doing this learning lesson, they're doing this common assessment. Here's 4 kids working with this teacher. Here's 2 kids working, 2 kids working, 2 kids on a computer. So people are getting what they need in an inclusive way, as opposed to, you're IB, so you get to go over there. And you're in this track, so you get to go over there. So yeah, I don't think, it's personalized and everyone gets what they need, but it's not personalized and that you're isolated by yourself. Does that help?
It does. And you're really sure about the equity, because the other piece is the equity. Is it unequal possibilities for each, you know, does one student not have the option of playing with a microscope or whatever?
Here's another really cool thing we saw in South Carolina. So they called it GT Dance, to your example. And so they have this time every day, it's called win time, what I need. Starts the day, everybody walks somewhere. So everybody goes to something that they need. And one of the options was they called GT Dance, and I kind of put my nose up, and I'm like, so this is a gifted program for kids who get good grades, and they get this awesome extension while the other kids are drilling, killing some group. She's like, oh no, it's good, yeah, it's GT, gifted talent, but it's for all kids. So any kid applies because they're excited about dance, and they get to be a part of this. She's like, there's 2 kids with IEPs in this group right now dancing. And there's a para who's teaching it up on the stage for the first 30 minutes of their day and win. So, no, I think there's equity, and the equity falls in I'm getting what I need, as opposed to you're forcing me to take this.
Awesome.
Heather, you had, okay. Jennifer.
I just had a comment. As a former preschool teacher, I just have to chuckle, because this is what any quality preschool does. And we did a lot of work to try to push it into the school, and Jen was actually the first one who was like, yeah, let's kind of like regroup what our kindergarten classroom looks like. And so I just am really excited about the whole thing.
And we did see some great examples this morning
Today, yeah.
when we toured Rankin. Almost every classroom we went into,
Yep.
there was the teacher with one group, the other students working individually. It was really kind of fun to see all the different things going on. So. Any other questions? Did anybody else have their hand up, comments?
I have a tiny bit of mine. So you mentioned bottom up, which I love. What are we, like, I see what we're doing, you know, we're making some plans, the administrators are doing things. What are we doing to get buy-in from the teachers, and how's that going?
Honestly, we're trying to just stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
And so I had this joke in our office that, you know, we get excited because we're training up principals, and they're getting a pretty firm understanding now of what it is. And then they're also getting really excited about how they can do this work, and they're building connections really quickly. So Jen, before we get off the plane, has already communicated with some of her staff, and they're connected with some of the teachers in South Carolina, and they're sharing documents, and they're like changing how they're, and I'm like, you know what it feels like? I was talking to them, like, this feels like somebody just walked into a fireworks stand and lit a match and just started kicking stuff over. We're just like watching things just go everywhere.
Hey,
Which
Matt,
is really,
who lit the
which is really exciting. So we're trying to like corral it a little bit, so to speak, just in an organized fashion. But at the same time, you know, you are gonna walk into Rankin and see a couple teachers, and we don't wanna hold that back, right? They learn a new instructional strategy, and it just works.
Mm-hmm.
And they see their kids are learning more, and they're more engaged, and like the whole energy is different. They're gonna do it, obviously. And then the teacher down the hall is gonna be like, what is that thing?
Yeah.
And so it goes about as fast as Micah's resignation letter. You know, but our job is really to identify the key tenets. And so, there are some things that I think, you know, people could get excited about. They go, hey, what if we try this? And we've had a couple proposals come back to us from a group of teachers, and they said, hey, here's what we really want to do. And the spirit has been good, but it fails to meet some of those marks. And we go, you know what? We like that you're brainstorming energy, and it's hard to bring in, but that's really not what we're talking about. That's missing these components. So for us right now, it's identifying those key tenets with our admin team, and then next year is going to be working with our admin team to create a pathway for them to onboard their staff. And the idea would be, we would take all staff and say, we want all staff to reach this level of understanding of this work. But we also want that fast lane group to have an opportunity to run. And that's the goal for next year, is that how can we make those connections so that our staff have connections across the country of, world-class educators, and they're, iron on iron and working together. But then also our staff is not interested in jumping on this next year. At least they understand what this work is about, so we're eliminating some misconceptions. That's what we're working on right now.
Okay, so more holding back than trying to make happen at this point.
Yeah, when we first kicked this off with our team of elementary principals last year, one of my favorite Lee Iacocca quotes is, "I'd rather be responsible for holding back a team of Mustangs than driving a team of mules." And, both present a challenge, but that's really what we have, is when Micah says, we do have some people that are kind of resisting this work, but really the energy is just, the mass of the energy is the opposite. It's just fun to try to, hey, we're moving about as fast as we can, and this is what we're working on.
Well, and a couple things we're seeing, like at the calendar committee, Pete's throwing out this wild idea, and there are those that are really kind of digging in their heels, like, we could never do this, like this, I don't see it, like they want to get on board, but to wrap their head around this concept of, we've always done it this way, how are we going to change it? I think moving forward, when, like how you guys got to go see this implemented, you get excited because you see how it's actually playing out, how it's working. Some of these other people that are kind of still have this reservation, and it's meeting after meeting with the same reservation, they still can't really grasp how this could work or what it could look like. So when we get to that point, and I think it's really just throwing out more ideas of, here, check out this school. They've been doing this for 5 years now. They've had hiccups, but just like these guys said, I mean, they were asking questions of some of the teachers of, if you could go back to the old way, would you? And they said, no, we would never go back. That's some of the stuff that I think the people that have some reservation, they just need a little more, they need to see it working. They need to see it implemented instead of this big, huge picture that we have right now of what it could be, because we're still in that phase of it, what could this look like? But it is working around the country. There are schools, there are districts that this is successful. And so the people with reservation, I think they just need to see a little bit more.
Well, they'll be maybe like other teachers in their.
We took 8, so I know Anthony, Lynn was there, but Anthony was my, so GHS, and also, it's almost the same exact thing. We could look at blowing up the calendar. That's like down the road. It's kind of a bigger picture thing if we went that way. But he's like, most of the top boundaries are just best. We do a lot of them. We just need to do them with intention. We need to make small moves to make them. But I would say probably 70% of it we can do with the current resources we have. I think that makes, when he got to see that in action, he was like, oh, we got this. The same kind of feeling that Jen had. And that was cool to see coming from.
I'd forgotten that Lynn went, because I wasn't on that. Did you want to share anything, Lynn?
I think you guys did great.
Jeff?
We have plans in the middle school of how we're going to do it.
There's elements of this that sounds just like the CRIS program from 40 years ago. If anybody has time to research that.
Anthony also said that. He's like, remember the first one here?
That originated with Kalispell, but Kalispell never adopted it, but all the outlying schools and elsewhere in the state used it.
I was actually part of one of those outlying school districts that adopted that, and went through all that CRIS training, and it is really good training. And the CRIS training speaks to the instructional practices that work best. And I think to expand on that work is now, instead of looking at maybe something that was developed locally that was really good, there's access now to mega analysis work that's been, across countries and across, literally
our employees benefit, and Denise, we have a fund in the interlocal agreement called.
Yeah, hold on, I'm planning on spending that, so.
I already found it, Denise found it for me, we know exactly how much is in there. It's called the Innovative Fund. That fund originated because the school district, had a settlement agreement with Chris, and that's where the money came from, was the Chris program.
I still have my books that I'm willing to share with people. Lloyd, did you have your hand up?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Any other questions, comments? This is, very helpful. Thank you for putting this all together. And just to honor everybody's time, I want to move ahead if there are no more questions or no more minute talks.
Keith had a couple handouts, so we'll just leave with you for
Okay,
homework.
sounds great.
These were some of our look fors, when we're going out and look at schools, it goes from, if you take a look at, from a curriculum centered to a learner driven, and a lot of the things that we talk about, those documents are from a school district in Wisconsin.
Kettle Moraine.
And they've been doing this work since about 2000. So they're well on their way, and they're a destination site for a lot of schools that go and figure some stuff out. And then Pete and I talk about this all the time, we're super excited about this, we're just fortunate to have Sarah as a thought partner. This isn't fall under her scope of work, but then she ended up creating the entire slide deck that we went through today, so, just appreciate her work. There should be a little tag at the bottom, created by, designed by Sarah. And then, we have been using the innovative tax, they call the grant or funds or?
Innovative Education Program Tax Credit.
And that was 2 years ago, one of Micah's brainchilds of, hey, he saw an email from OPI float out of this coming across, and we should be the first to the horse race. The first year, we were all there at 7-something in the morning, got all the computers fired up, logged in, we were able to capitalize on that. Last year, more people knew about it, but we were still able to generate, so that's just generosity from, our community with the foresight that they can direct their tax dollars to something innovative. And so it checks that box, and plus, we've been pursuing as many grants as possible to pay for these types of onboarding with our staff. So we're excited that we'll be able to fund, this idea of sending teachers to be able to see it firsthand. And it's not coming from the general fund, and we're not going to go to taxpayers and ask them for money. So we're finding those solutions, but.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our second public comment time. Any public comment? The same policies and procedures.
Can I have this handout?
Yes?
So, 3 minutes up here to talk, we didn't start camera, but I think we're all tired. Anyway, it's lots of the time, it just feels like I'm talking to myself, talking to the wall. Doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of, action on what I do say, which is unfortunate. Because you don't see very many other parents showing up, so I think I probably represent quite a few people. I don't like the NTSBA at all. I really don't. I don't think that it's good in schools. I don't think that they have children first. This whole presentation was great because it was about putting the students first. It almost seemed like it was actually going to hold teachers accountable because these students are going to be checked for their proficiency. They're not just going to be keeping a seat warm and going through the motions. And then, the ones that really get into it are going to excel faster. That's great if they can get out earlier. Obviously, if they graduate in 3 years, you lose a whole year of funding for that student, but you also have the problem of the increased student body, the younger ones coming up. So that might help solve the problem of not having overpopulated high schools. No, the NTSBA, they're always, lobbying for example, last year, or last session, 2021, there was a school charter bill. And the MTSBA sent out an email, goes out to all the teachers in the, since you're in your district, since they're, you know, part of it, teachers get this email and say, hey, call your legislature, this thing's not good. Well, why is the MTSBA telling them that? Like, shouldn't they be free to decide that for themselves? And instead of being presented with a one-sided, picture on that? Because I think the charter bill would have been good. You know, they're constantly against school choice. And school choice is obviously with the student's best interest in mind, because parents have them at home, they're homeschooling them, and then they can take their tax dollars instead of it going here when they don't even have their student here, and actually use it to help teach their students at home, which is their choice. It'd be nice if their money could follow the kids. But obviously the MTSBA is completely against that. And finally,
30 seconds.
I think it's unethical for, earlier, Mr. Vaughn asked a question about abstaining from a vote. And the answer was, well, if you have a conflict of interest. I think it's totally unethical that you would vote on an MTSBA issue in this board when you already admit clearly your bias. So I think that's the perfect time for you to abstain from a vote, Sue Corrigan. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we will move on. The upcoming meetings, please take a look. I know we have been moving things around a lot. So, you know, kind of stay up on when your committees are meeting. And our next board meeting is the 11th of April, unless we have to get together for superintendent search information or long-range facility planning or any of our other things that we've got going.
One quick note, Sue.
Yeah.
On the 25th, we're actually going to have some students set up to do some presentations prior to the board meeting.
On April 25th, that
Yep.
one?
Yep, to do some demonstrations of some of their transformational learning.
Oh, good.
And some of the things that they have going on, so. Yep, we'll send out email with better detail on it, but it won't be part of the board meeting, but it'd be a chance for the board to observe and see some things going
Well,
on.
that'll be cool to see that.
So we'll bring it to you.
Okay, great.
It appeared on there that the school invitation on the 11th, so I think it's the 11th, if you zoom back out. Is that correct? We just did.
It was the.
Oh, building updates, I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Oh, there's a lot of information on that chart.
Only a couple
Yeah.
more.
Okay. Want to honor everybody's time, so
Yeah.
motion and seconded, all in favor, please
How about
say
11?
aye.
Aye. 35.
I know. Any opposed? I know, we haven't gone this long for a long time. Good discussion, though.